Chapter 14:17. In the endless darkness, the concepts of space and time seem to have lost all meaning. Then, with a light cracking sound, a flame appeared from within. But what was incomparably strange was that even though this flame appeared, it could only illuminate itself. There wasn't the slightest bit of light that spread into the surrounding darkness. Illusory and distorted, a voice that seemed to come from far away came from the flame. I need absolute secrecy. The entire process of this matter cannot be revealed. Another voice rang out directly in the darkness, as if it came from all directions. Of course, we can guarantee this because the dead can't speak. The flame was silent for a moment. Let me confirm one last time. He really hasn't returned? There was a dignified tone in the voice. We can confirm this. The voice in the darkness was calm and gentle, giving off an incomparably powerful and trustworthy feeling. Sir, please rest assured that there will be no hidden dangers in this matter. Even if he returns afterwards, what is done cannot be undone. Those with vested interests will not allow an unstable factor to exist that threatens them. Under the current circumstances, with just a bit of guidance, we can eradicate him and bring this matter to a complete end. And sir, you will also obtain the life extension fragment that we promised you. This is a very good deal, relatively speaking, so it doesn't need to bear too much risk. If it weren't for the fact that your status is the most suitable, we could easily find many people willing to cooperate with you. The illusory and distorted voice sounded out from the flame. It is best if everything goes as you say. The darkness responded, please rest assured. Puff! The flame extinguished, and the darkness returned to tranquility. It was like an eternal night had covered the land, and it would continue to be like this for the endless years to come. A half-saint was indeed formidable. Without a doubt, Baijan Ye, who could easily wound him, was even more formidable. But in the end, he wasn't a true saint. And in the current situation, unless a true saint arrived, there was no way to stabilize the peach garden that was tossed about in the turbulent waves. So after a brief period of silence, the covetous people attacked once more. And if they still dared to attack after witnessing the previous scene, their strength naturally wasn't ordinary. Those who blaspheme the holy path will be punished. A deep and dignified voice suddenly exploded between the heavens and earth. It was like a divine oracle, carrying with it a formidable will that couldn't be resisted. As if what he said was an established fact, a prophecy that would eventually come true. He said that blasphemers will lose their eyes and will no longer be able to see the world clearly. 100 battles in the wilds, eyes instantly dimmed. His pupils were covered by a layer of paleness. It was as if a layer of frost had formed on the surface of clear water. He said that blasphemers will lose their arms and will never be able to touch anything again. The paleness appeared again, like some sort of marble coating. Starting from the fingertips of both hands, it quickly spread all the way up and finally covered both of his arms. He said that blasphemers will lose their feet and will never be able to stand on the earth again. A similar paleness swiftly appeared on his feet, but this time, 100 battles in the wild did not continue to remain silent. He allowed it to continue spreading and depriving him. The corners of his mouth curled up into a cold and creepy smile. Found you! He turned around abruptly, and the paleness in his eyes disappeared. His pitch-black pupils shone, reflecting a faint, illusory figure. Ka-cha! Ka-cha! Shattering sounds came from his hands and feet at the same time. His paleness collapsed and dissipated. 100 battles in the wild punched out. A wild power erupted in an instant. In the empty space in front of him, a figure appeared with a muffled grunt. It was clear that he had been caught off guard and had no time to dodge, so he had to bear the majority of the strength of this punch. As blood sprayed out, it shook and shattered into a bloody fog, but it didn't fall to the ground. Instead, it emitted an ear-piercing scream. In the next moment, the bloody fog rushed out. It condensed into a tall figure with pairs of blood wings spread out behind it. Invisible blood-red flames wrapped around it, as if it were an emissary from hell. And this was the name of this strange technique, Emissary of Hell, a vengeful spirit that came from hell. It had the ability to directly attack the soul. It could use the cruelest and most painful methods to tear apart an enemy's soul. It could accurately capture every soul fragment and drag them into the endless pain of hell. It was clear that Yi, who had fought 100 battles, did not intend to give this messenger of hell a chance to display his true strength. As he sneered, he stomped on the ground, and a muffled sound wave suddenly rose. It felt as if his foot had landed heavily on the surface of a huge drum. The emissary of hell, which was rapidly approaching, suddenly froze. Then, cracks rapidly appeared on its body. Like a broken bubble, it disappeared with a pop sound, and the spatial tremors caused by the drum didn't disappear just like that. They continued to rush towards the phantom that had appeared like endless waves. They sucked him in and, bit by bit, forced him from an illusory state to become real. The half-saint who had revealed himself was a young man in a white robe and holding a scripture in his hand. But for a saint, one's appearance was something that could be determined with a single thought. So, his youth didn't mean anything. Only the vicissitudes in his eyes showed that he was an ancient half-saint who had lived for a very, very long time. There was a trace of anger in his eyes. Clearly, he hadn't expected that he, who had always been known for being strange and difficult to defend against, would be forced to reveal himself by a junior who hadn't even stepped into the divine path. Moreover, he had been at a disadvantage right from the start. This was the Peach Garden. He had to admit that in his heart, there was indeed a trace of awe and veneration. Of course, his target wasn't Baijian Yuya in front of him. No matter how strong he was still a mortal spirit below the divine path. He would eventually decay with the passage of time. What he was in awe and veneration of was the Lord of the Peach Garden that he had never seen before. He was indeed a peak true saint, known as the strongest existence below the sovereign realm. He had taught a disciple who hadn't even stepped into the bitter sea stage, but he already possessed such terrifying power. For the geniuses of the world, it wasn't a difficult thing to do to surpass levels to battle, especially after they had received some sort of gift from their elders. But this was only limited to spiritual seeds. Stepping into the bitter sea stage and becoming a half-step saint, even if they hadn't reached the other shore, or perhaps they hadn't clearly seen the exact location of the other shore, but the level of their life had already begun to rise. They had already become divine spirit seeds. This was a completely different level of difference. To surpass such a difference, the difficulty was unimaginable. It was something that was basically impossible to accomplish. Kill! With a low roar, Baijian Yuya suddenly charged over. An icy killing intent erupted from his body, condensing to the point that it seemed to take on a physical form. The white-robed half-step saint's heart suddenly shrank. It was only now that he could clearly see what Baijian Yuya felt: terror and despair. Of course, what was terrifying was his aura, and what was despairing was the powerful will of a half-step saint. He had a clear intuition that if he were to fight against Baijian Yuya in such a state, he would soon be killed. "Help me!" The white-robed half-step saint roared. He suddenly opened the scripture in his hand, forcefully ripping off a page. With this action, the white-robed half-step saint's body stiffened, a deep pain flashing in his eyes. Without the slightest hesitation, he forcefully threw out the paper. The moment it left his hand, there was a cracking sound as it shattered, leaving behind countless characters floating in the air. These were characters that he had never seen before. They seemed to be formed from some sort of symbol, a long string of characters that occasionally broke apart, but there seemed to be some sort of charm circulating within them. It was like a surging river, and the river water was filled with endless light. Hum, hum. In the shaking, these strange characters rapidly faded away, erased by some invisible strength. At the same time, they lost their restraints on the river. Thus, the river water broke through the dike, turning into a torrent that flooded out in all directions. Endless and dazzling light erupted, as if a great sun had suddenly lit up in front of him. Then, a pure white figure emerged from the light. It had a soft and beautiful face that was difficult to distinguish between a man and a woman. Its body was nearly naked, but it didn't reveal anything that could be seen. A pair of pure white wings spread out from its back, gently flapping, releasing an ethereal aura. It was an aura that caused one to instinctively feel awe. Without needing to activate it, it opened its eyes. Within them was pure light, gentle to the extreme, as if it could wash away all sin in the world. Its eyes turned and fell onto Baijan Yuye. It lifted a hand and grasped forward. A formidable, imprisoning strength descended from nothingness, acting on Baijan Yuye's body. It constantly wrapped around him like chains, temporarily trapping him where he stood. At this time, another figure appeared above Baijan Yuye's head. His entire body was shrouded in a black robe, and an invisible black fog lingered around his body. Resentment, fear, despair, destruction, and other strong negative emotions were constantly emitted from his body. From beneath the black robe, a pale hand without the slightest hint of blood appeared. It was like a cold corpse's palm. As it clenched its fist, an astonishingly large scythe phantom appeared. It quickly solidified, revealing its original color. It was a bright red color, as if it had eaten the blood of millions of people. Evil whispers, pained moans, despairing wails, crazy roars, all sorts of sounds drilled into Baijan Yuye's ears, disturbing his mind and crushing his will. His mind was corroded and covered with despair and fear. Shwa, the pale, corpse-like palm suddenly raised the blood-red scythe. Like a flash of blood-red lightning, it slashed towards Baijan Yuye's head. At this moment, the terrifying noises suddenly became even more intense. Thump! A low and dull sound suddenly came from within Baijan Yuye's body. It was like something that had been slumbering had been awakened by the stimulation of danger and was beating. Thump! Another sound, faster and more powerful than the previous one. Then came the third, the fourth, the fifth. His chest was shaking, and as the speed increased, the muffled thumps became heavier and heavier. It was as if there was a second heart hidden in Baijan Yuye's chest. The tiny blood vessels on the surface of his eyes suddenly bulged. But what spread out wasn't a blood-red color, but a dazzling gold. It was like a burning flame, or like a strange mark formed by countless patterns intertwining with each other. At this moment, he gave off a terrifying feeling that he was extremely powerful, as if he could destroy everything in his path. The inherited power from the divine kingdom of destruction. How dare you use it against me? What a stupid choice. A deep voice came from Baijan Yuye's mouth. There wasn't much emotion in his voice, but everyone could clearly feel the anger in his voice. It was filled with the smell of destruction. Bang! Amidst the deep sound, the white-winged Baijan Yuye's hand suddenly shattered. It was as if it had been hit by a terrifying force and was sent flying. As he tumbled, his handsome face revealed an expression of pain and struggle. On his pure and flawless face, patterns that emitted a depraved and decaying aura appeared. Two slender, spiral horns drilled out of his forehead. At the same time, the white-winged Baijan Yuye's back seemed to have suffered the most terrifying stain in the world. They quickly turned pitch black, and black flames of nothingness appeared. The flames gradually spread and engulfed him, burning him to ashes in an instant. The blood-red scythe that was slashing toward Baijan Yuye suddenly seemed to be corroded by the river of time. The blood-red surface of the scythe quickly darkened and shriveled, like a flower that had lost its moisture. Then it began to rot. From the tip of the scythe, it quickly spread upward. Large patches of rust were mottled, giving off a strong aura of death and destruction. A painful groan came from under the black robe. The pale palm released in time, but it clearly couldn't block the power of death that was spreading from the scythe. His flesh and blood rapidly decayed, turning into sticky pus that dripped down. The exposed bones quickly turned jet black, as if they had been corroded by the dark night. The white-robed sage-to-be's mouth and nose were bleeding, and his eyes were filled with fear. He and the man under the black robe, whose body was rotting, turned around and fled. They didn't dare to stay any longer. An awakened deity from the divine kingdom of destruction. The peach garden can indeed bring surprises. A low and calm voice suddenly rang out in the world. Some invisible but extremely vast power descended and enveloped 100 battles in the wild, whose body was covered in gold runes. It had already regarded him as its spoils of war. Chapter 14:18. Finally, a true saint powerhouse couldn't help but make a move. 100 battles Yeyes exposed flesh erupted with golden lines, becoming increasingly dazzling. Dull and violent collisions erupted from the void. This was him trying to break through the suppressive strength outside his body. If you were in your peak state, you might be able to contend with me. But now that you have not fully recovered, you are no match for me. Without warning, a figure appeared in their line of sight. The void around him trembled, forming a curtain that blocked everyone's vision. All eyes that gathered around him could only see an illusory figure. But without exception, all eyes were filled with awe and fear. A ruler hid from the world, and a true saint was at the peak of vast Yang. They rarely appeared, but their attacks could cause the world to tremble. Today, with the peach garden as a trigger, a peak of this realm had arrived. Shua, a figure flashed out from the defense of the peach garden. It was Bai Feng, the only saint in the peach garden. He cupped his hands together and bowed. Bai Feng greets the true saint. In the shaking void, the true saint's voice was calm. Do you want to save him? Bai Feng shook his head. No, I came here to greet an old friend of my master. He bowed and said, Welcome, great Zhou Saint. Another figure appeared next to Baijan Yuya. Similarly, the void trembled, and his surroundings became blurry. He lifted a hand, and with a pop, the suppressive strength that enveloped him suddenly disappeared. Great Zhou Saint's voice was calm. I once owed the garden master a favor. I asked St. Lin to give me some face. The scope of the divine Tao circle was limited, and there were very few true saints. Besides a few who lived in seclusion, even if they didn't know each other, they had met several times. It wasn't difficult to know each other's identities. St. Lin frowned. Great Zhou Saint wishes to protect the peach garden with a single strike. Great Zhou Saint lightly said, At least today, I will not sit idly by. In other words, they could discuss this in the future. After several breaths of time, the air was quiet. St. Lin turned and left. 3 days from now, I will return to the peach garden. I hope that great Zhou Saint will not stop me. Shua, with a step, the saint disappeared without a trace. The terrifying aura that enveloped the peach garden suddenly dissipated, giving everyone room to breathe. Bai Feng bowed and said, Thank you for your help, sage. On the surface of Baijan Yuye's body, large patches of golden patterns disappeared. His face was pale, and he was panting heavily. Thank you, sage. Zhou Xing nodded. Let's talk after we enter the peach orchard. A hint of hesitation flashed in Bai Feng's eyes, but it quickly disappeared. She raised her hand and gestured. Saint Zhou, please come with me. Shua. The three of them flew into the barrier of the peach blossom garden. As far as the eye could see, countless peach trees were blooming luxuriantly. Not much had changed because of the death of the yardmaster. At this moment, there seemed to be a soundless gale howling above his head, sweeping up the billions of petals and forming a wall of petals that completely covered the sky. This was the barrier of the peach orchard that the three of them had just passed through. It was the result of years of preparation by the owner of the orchard, and its power was extremely terrifying. Zhou Saint's eyes focused, and then he showed a look of admiration, as expected of the Yardmaster. Her cultivation is indeed profound, and her strength is extremely powerful. She could actually build such an amazing defense barrier. Even if a true saint were to come personally, it would be difficult for him to do anything in a short time. Bai Feng smiled. If Master could hear what Zhou Saint said right now, he would be extremely gratified. This barrier of the peach orchard is indeed one of the efforts of his life. It can ensure the safety of the peach orchard inside and outside. Baijan Yuye's pupils shrank slightly. He sensed a trace of abnormality in these words. Zhou Saint was silent for a moment, and then he said slowly, In this situation, it is understandable that you are cautious. Considering your friendship with the yardmaster, I can pretend that this test didn't happen, but it better not happen again. After saying this, he turned around and left. I will stand guard outside the peach orchard. No one will offend me for 5 days. Schwa, Zhou Saint's figure disappeared inside the barrier. Bai Feng's face stiffened slightly, and a bitter smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Second brother, I am afraid that I have the heart of a villain. Zhou Saint is only willing to protect the peach orchard for 5 days. Bai Zhanyu, Yi shook his head. You're not wrong. Moreover, Zhou Saint has already said that he can understand what you are doing now. Bai Feng took a deep breath. Eldest brother is in seclusion to seek a breakthrough. I will go find Senior Zhou Xin now and kowtow to apologize to him. I will ask him to stay for a few more days. He turned around and chased after her, but soon came back with a helpless expression. Senior Zhou Saint is not willing to see me. He is not moved by what I said. Bai Zhanyu took a deep breath. 5 days it is. Perhaps this is Zhou Saint's limit. He is just saying it. In the end, you and I can only rely on ourselves. But 5 days, eldest brother has been lingering on the threshold for countless years. He can take that step at any time. 5 days is enough. There was another part that Bai Zhanyu did not say. If 5 days were not enough, any more time would be meaningless. Bai Feng seemed to understand. She took a deep breath and said, For many years, I have been taking care of the barrier of the peach orchard. I am most familiar with it. Now, I'm also the only saint in the peach orchard. I can fully activate its power. So as long as I'm alive, I will not allow anyone to come in and disturb eldest brother's breakthrough. He bowed and left quickly. Countless peach blossoms tumbled and danced in the air. Soon, he disappeared. Bai Zhanyu coughed and raised his hand to cover his mouth. When he finally calmed down, his palm was already dark red. His power had not fully recovered. Forcibly using the limit of his realm had caused him a great backlash. But this was something he had to do. He had to let all those who coveted the peach orchard know that the disciples of the peach orchard still had the courage and the power to resist. Anyone with ill intentions would be met with their counterattack. Zhou Saint had promised to do it in 5 days. With his status, he should be able to do it. He hoped that everything went well for eldest brother. Also, he hoped that youngest brother would come back as soon as possible. Only by having a true saint could they truly stabilize the situation in the peach orchard. Otherwise, everything else would only slow down the deterioration of the situation and would not help the final result. And in this matter, he was doomed to be powerless. This made the proud and combative Bai Zhanyu find it hard to accept. He smiled bitterly. But soon, he adjusted his mood and walked deeper into the peach orchard. When he was helping his teacher clean up the wine cellar, he inadvertently made another discovery. He had already reported this matter to his teacher, and his teacher had told him to deal with it himself. Could it be that he had already guessed that this day would come? As his thoughts raced, a trace of determination appeared in the depths of Bai Zhanyu's eyes. If something unexpected really happened, then even if he had to risk his life, he would protect his junior brothers and sisters of the peach orchard. He would give Peach Orchard a chance to recover and turn the situation around. With obsession in his heart, his steps became more steady and solemn. Accompanied by a series of coughs, the peach orchard's second senior brother disappeared into the depths of the peach blossoms. This direction led to the peach orchard's wine cellar. For countless years, it had devoured billions of peach blossoms and produced a steady stream of wine. However, no one unrelated to the peach orchard was allowed to approach it. The only people who had ever entered were the yardmaster, eldest brother, and a second brother. Something had happened in the peach orchard. Not long after leaving Xiantong City, Qinyu learned of this news. As the heavens shook, the secrets of the Saint Dao circle inevitably spread through all kinds of secret channels. The 8 saints had perished, the catastrophe had begun, and the world had changed. All cultivators were like fish in a vast river. Only by experiencing the baptism of the great catastrophe would they have the qualifications to survive. Otherwise, they would eventually turn into ashes. Chinyu had heard the yardmaster mention something similar. He had personally experienced the 3 Saint Dao catastrophes, and they were also the shuffling and replacement of Vasyong. On that day, Chinyu and even the yardmaster had never imagined that when the 4th catastrophe arrived, they would all be caught up in it. One would perish, and the other would rise. And the peach orchard would become an eye-catching and dangerous whirlpool in this rushing river. Boom! He punched out, and the space in front of him shattered. Boundless darkness filled the space. Chinyu took a step forward and entered the void outside. He frowned, and his eyes were cold. He didn't have the slightest thought of retreat or fear. He was rushing back to the peach orchard as fast as he could. Wait for me. In the familiar darkness, the flame appeared again. But this time, before it could make a sound, the darkness had already responded. Your Excellency, you have violated the agreement between you and me. Please give us a reasonable explanation, otherwise we will regard it as a betrayal. The darkness was silent, but it seemed to hide countless horrors. It was as if a giant mouth could appear at any time and swallow everything. The voice in the flame sounded still ethereal and ethereal. An accident has occurred in your plan. I can only deal with it randomly. The darkness was silent for a moment. Please explain in detail. The voice of the flame said, the power of the peach orchard barrier is far stronger than what your information said. No, it is much stronger. It is not only in terms of defense, but also has an astonishing offensive ability. I have personally sensed this, and I can guarantee it. If we follow the original plan and face the peach orchard barrier's counterattack, I am not confident that I can protect myself, and I can't be sure that the subsequent events will proceed according to our previous expectations. The darkness was silent for a long time, as if trying to determine whether what he said was true or false. We will verify this. If it is true, then it is indeed our negligence. But the great existence in the darkness tells me that your Excellency is still hiding something. A light cough came from the flame, and the voice became more and more serious. Yes, there's another reason that made me change my plan. In the peach orchard, someone is trying to make a breakthrough. The voice in the darkness was full of surprise. True Saint, yes. Although the aura is very obscure and has been carefully concealed, I happen to be more sensitive to changes in aura. You can also confirm this. If there is no accident, the person who is making a breakthrough is the first disciple of the peach orchard. Thank you for your frankness, Your Excellency. Your actions will resolve many unnecessary misunderstandings between us. Please wait patiently, Your Excellency. We will soon get an answer. The darkness quieted down. Only the flame that could only illuminate itself burned quietly in the silence. Thank you for your patience. We express our apologies for our previous negligence, and we are willing to pay you an additional 10% as a token of our gratitude. Very evidently, in a short period of time, they had already confirmed the truth of everything. Just this point alone was enough to show that behind the voice in the darkness, there was an extremely powerful force. The flame responded, yes. Then now, we need to discuss the follow-up plan again. Also, I need to confirm again, has he returned to the peach orchard? The voice in the darkness said, please do not worry about this, Your Excellency. The great existence in the darkness has always been watching the peach orchard. As long as he appears, before he nears the peach orchard, we will discover him in advance. The flame said, I hope that this time, you will not make a mistake again. Of course, we promise, Your Excellency. The thousand-faced assassin stood guard outside the eldest senior brother's seclusion. She had changed her face again. She was beautiful and alluring, like a blooming peony. At this moment, her brows were slightly furrowed. Her gaze fell on the courtyard in front of her, revealing an unconcealable worry. Because of her cultivation method, she could pass through the seal and vaguely sense a little of the changes in the chi within the courtyard. The eldest senior brother had already successfully taken a step into the sea of bitterness. If his goal was only this, he could have already broken out of seclusion. But it was very clear that the eldest senior brother's goal was not only limited to the level of semi-saint. His goal was to break through 2 realms, reach the other shore, and achieve the peak of true divine. Whether this situation had ever happened before, the thousand-faced assassin could not be sure, but as far as she knew, there was no precedent of success. And the eldest senior brother had already been frozen for a long time, unable to take another step. As time passed, this was obviously not good news. Chapter 1419. In a grand and dark hall, the air was full of obscurity, like some kind of invisible liquid, emitting a cold aura. A round platform stood in the center of the hall, its edges unmarked, as if it was a part of the hall itself. Now, two figures in black robes stood opposite each other on the round platform, each with their hands forward, a crescent-shaped object floating between their fingers. One of them suddenly said, "Dusk." After a few moments, the other person said, "Order." Hum on the surface of the crescent-shaped object, blood stains suddenly appeared, spreading rapidly, and finally covering it entirely. Thousand Faces' expression suddenly changed. She sensed that the eldest brother's aura suddenly became chaotic and disorderly, showing signs of losing control. She hurried forward a few steps, but before she could get close to the eldest brother's courtyard, she was pushed away by an invisible force, unable to get close. It was not impossible to break through, but it would undoubtedly aggravate the danger that the eldest brother was now facing. Taking a deep breath and suppressing the panic in her heart, Thousand Face turned around and screamed, "Eldest brother is in trouble." Soon, except for Bifong who maintained the barrier, all the disciples of the Peach Garden gathered in the courtyard. Without exception, all attempts to get close to the courtyard were rejected by the isolation force. The second brother's expression was solemn. He vaguely knew some secrets about the eldest brother, and because of this, he knew what kind of danger he was in now. Breaking through 2 realms in a row. If he failed, there was no way out. Taking a deep breath, he said in a low voice, "You stay here, I will immediately go to Zhou Sheng. Now, only he can help the eldest brother break through." Swoosh, the second brother, turned and left, rushing out of the Peach Garden as fast as he could to find Zhou Sheng. With a thought, the space suddenly twisted, sealing off the area where the two were. He looked up at Zhou Sheng, frowning slightly, and bowed. "This is an emergency. Please forgive me for my offense, Zhou Sheng." Zhou Sheng said, "What is it?" The second brother took a deep breath. The eldest brother is breaking through in seclusion, and his aura suddenly became chaotic and out of control. "Please help." Zhou Sheng frowned at first, then seemed to think of something, and his brows suddenly furrowed. Breaking through 2 realms in a row, seeing the second brother nod, he growled, "Nonsense." He suddenly got up. "Take me there immediately." The second brother was slightly relieved. "Thank you, Sir Zhou Sheng. Please come with me." Perhaps they had really thought too much before, but fortunately, Zhou Sheng did not mind. "Wait." Zhou Sheng lifted his hand and touched his brow. His body glowed, and an almost transparent shadow walked out. The shadow quickly solidified when it came into contact with the air, and it looked exactly like Zhou Sheng. Second brother had a look of realization. Zhou Sheng was worried that someone would attack the Peach Garden after he left, so he intentionally left a clone behind. "Let's go." Swish, the two of them flew through the barrier of the Peach Blossom Garden and entered the Peach Blossom Garden. Without any hesitation, they followed Yu Yi of the 100 Battles and headed straight for the eldest brother's courtyard. The thousand-faced assassin, Lei Xiaoyu, and the others who were guarding outside quickly bowed. "Greetings, Saint Zhou." Zhou Sheng nodded with a solemn face. His eyes fell on the small courtyard, and his expression became even more solemn. "There's a problem with the breakthrough. I don't have absolute confidence, but I can only try my best." His eyes swept across the crowd. "Next, I will enter and try to help him save the situation, but the final result cannot be guaranteed. Also, no matter what you feel later on, do not barge in. A clash between true sages is not something you have a right to interfere with." The thousand-faced assassin opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. Yu Yi of the 100 Battles said in a low voice, "We understand. Sir Zhou Sheng, please make your move immediately." Zhou Sheng turned and walked towards the small courtyard. Strong winds rose without any wind, swirling around his robes and making them stick to his body. It was clear that he had also encountered an invisible force that repelled him. Zhou Sheng frowned and pointed forward. There was a muffled sound, and the blocking force instantly disappeared. He took a step forward, and the courtyard doors opened and closed in the next moment, cutting off everyone's line of sight. Second brother said, Zhou Sheng has been Master's friend for many years, and he is still willing to help the Peach Blossom Garden in today's situation. He is trustworthy enough. With his help, eldest brother will definitely be safe. After saying this, he looked at the thousand-faced assassin in silence. Seventh sister, you have just recovered from your injuries. You should not have too many emotional fluctuations. The thousand-faced assassin said, Thank you for the reminder, second brother. As she spoke, her eyes were still on the small courtyard. Second brother sighed inwardly, but he did not say anything. Everyone fell silent. If the eldest brother could successfully break through, the crisis of the Peach Blossom Garden would naturally disappear. But youngest brother was also missing, and there had been no news of him. Could it be that this was the fate of the Peach Blossom Garden? With the fall of Master, it would also usher in an irreversible destruction? The moment the courtyard doors closed, Zhou Sheng looked up at the peach tree in the courtyard. At this moment, all its leaves and flowers had withered and appeared to be contaminated with blood. It emitted a breath that made one's heart palpitate and tumble. Your Excellency, Zhou Sheng. In the room, the eldest brother's voice sounded. Although weak, it was still calm. Zhou Sheng grunted. Gao Zhuang, how is your current state? The eldest brother was silent for a moment and said, Thank you for your concern, Saint. There was some deviation when I broke through, but it was still within control. Also, you should know that I don't really like this name, so you can call me Xiao Gao. The corner of Zhou Sheng's mouth twitched. You still have a mood to joke now? It seems that your state is indeed still under control. But to break through 2 realms and reach the Nirvana realm is something that has never happened since ancient times. It is too dangerous for you to do so rashly. He stepped forward. I have studied the backfire of breaking through, and I should be able to help you stabilize the chaotic power in your body. The eldest brother said, There is no need to trouble Saint Zhou. I can deal with it myself. Zhou Sheng stopped. Perhaps you can indeed deal with it, but there is not enough time for you now. The situation in the Peach Garden is extremely dangerous, and an uncontrollable accident could happen at any time. He frowned. Or do you not trust me? The saint is still willing to help the Peach Garden in such a dangerous situation. How could I be disrespectful? Then I will have to trouble Saint Zhou. The door opened by itself, and Zhou Sheng saw Gao Zhuang sitting at the round table behind the door. His face was pale, and he nodded with a smile. He stepped into the room and frowned. He raised his hand and placed it on the eldest brother. I will temporarily give up control of my own power and hand it over to you. After all, you know the condition of your own body best. The eldest brother nodded. Thank you, Saint Zhou. Majestic and gentle power was infused into the eldest brother's body. It was extremely docile and completely obeyed his will. With the help of Zhou Sheng's power, the eldest brother quickly stabilized the condition of his body. His pale face slowly regained some color. The foreign power that had invaded his body was quickly purged. The eldest brother secretly frowned. Perhaps he had thought of the wrong target, and the source of the danger was not Zhou Sheng. Who was the one who had done it? The sense of danger had not been resolved. Even though the power of the pollution was being purged and was quickly fading, it made him feel even more uneasy. This meant that the danger was not completely over. It did not matter. With Zhou Sheng's help, the power of the pollution would soon be purged. When that time came, he would take the last step and step into the Nirvana realm and become a true saint. Even if there was still danger then, he was confident that he could protect the Peach Garden while the sovereign was in seclusion. Focus! Zhou Sheng growled behind him. The eldest brother took a deep breath and closed his eyes, doing all he could to purge the foreign power of the pollution from his body. With all his might, he quickly reached the end. Finally, the last of the power of the pollution was purged from his body. The eldest brother grunted and opened his mouth to spit out a sticky blood clot. It fell to the ground, accompanied by green smoke and a violent, corroding sound. He opened his eyes and looked relieved. "Thank you, Saint." The eldest brother grunted, and his face turned pale before he could finish his sentence. Zhou Sheng's palm that landed on him was like a sharp blade, cutting through his flesh and sinking deep into his body. Dong Dong Gao Zhuang's heart started beating uncontrollably. Along with it, the power that surged into Gao Zhuang's body went out of control. They were no longer docile and gentle like before. They were like venomous snakes that had just woken up from hibernation, baring their ferocious fangs. At the same time, countless cold tentacles emerged from the body of the venomous snake, spreading out like a spider web. Because Zhou Sheng had secretly spread his power throughout his body in order to purge the foreign power of the pollution, it only took an instant for the eldest brother to be completely controlled. Gulp, gulp. The sound of swallowing, which was not rapid but filled with endless greed, rang clearly in his ears. The eldest brother could feel that he was being devoured. As for who was doing all this, there was no need to say. He laughed bitterly and said, "Why are you doing this, Saint?" The swallowing did not stop. Zhou Sheng's calm voice sounded, "Because I do not want to share with others, and the power of a newly ascended true Saint is enough to help me break through my current level." Black flames burned quietly in the depths of his eyes. The aura of coldness, desolation, and death continued to emanate from his body. With the two of them as the center, ice quietly condensed. The white frost spread and covered everything. A cultivator of the way of ghosts. If Qin Yu was here, he would be able to recognize at a glance that what Zhou Sheng was releasing was a terrifying aura that belonged to the way of ghosts. It was different from the Avicii Saint, but it was just as strange and terrifying. Gao Zhuang closed his eyes and opened them again. There were still traces of pain in them, but there was more coldness. Strictly speaking, I am now at the level of a true saint. Do you have absolute confidence that you can completely devour me? Zhou Sheng laughed softly, revealing his strong confidence. Of course, since I have already made my move, I will not give you the slightest chance to resist. Give up. When I devour you, I will announce to the public that you have failed to break through, and you will end up with your body and soul destroyed. And in return, I promise you that I will protect the Peach Garden through this crisis. Of course, you can also try to resist, but this means that you have rejected my good intentions. As revenge, I will kill everyone in the Peach Garden. You have already experienced the power that I have, as well as my powerful concealment ability. As long as I am willing, no one in the Peach Garden will be able to escape. For example, 7,000 lines. The eldest brother's pupils shrank slightly, and he frowned. His eyes were filled with emotions, and his body became more and more tense. I don't believe you. Zhou Sheng laughed softly. I am willing to swear by the great path that as long as you do not resist, all the promises that I have made before will take effect immediately. There was a moment of silence. Only the sound of gulping could be heard, echoing in the room that was already covered in frost. The eldest brother spoke with difficulty. All right. He closed his eyes, hiding the scarlet that appeared in the depths of his eyes. A terrifying chill was released from the courtyard, and everything within its range was covered in ice. In the extreme cold, there was a breath that made one's heart palpitate in fear. That was the smell of death. Thousand Faces' expression changed. She closed her eyes and focused her senses, but all her power of perception was blocked out by a terrifying chill. Something has happened to the master. Before she could say anything, 100 Battles in the Wild's eyes suddenly turned blood red, and a violent power broke out of his body. He stared at the small courtyard, as if he could see through all obstacles, and saw the eldest brother, who was still Zhou Sheng, who was almost glued to him. Ghost Path. The two words were cold, and 100 Battles in the Wild did not hesitate. He took a heavy step forward and raised his hand to blast forward. Boom! Countless pieces of ice were shattered, and the closed door of the courtyard shook violently, but it was not blasted open. Third brother. 100 battles in the wild roared. Rumble. The barrier of the peach garden moved, and countless peach blossoms fell, as if it was raining peach blossoms. Chapter 14:20. Every peach blossom that fell had an indescribably terrifying impact that heavily bombarded the courtyard that was covered in frost. The sounds of shattering filled the air. The icy strength that filled the air was forcefully torn apart. Within the room, Zhou Sheng, who was wrapped around the eldest senior brother, roared, "How dare you lie to me?" Shua, the eldest senior brother, opened his eyes, his voice cold and indifferent. "I don't believe in demons." The blood-red color in his eyes grew thicker, like viscous blood. He opened his mouth and screamed soundlessly. During this process, his hair flew up in a manner that defied all common sense. Each strand turned the color of blood and emitted a thick, bloody light. Thump, thump, the devouring continued. But at this time, a blood-red grid appeared in the air. It appeared from within the eldest senior brother's body and slowly spread toward Zhou Sheng. "Humph, it's useless. In the end, you still don't understand the strength of a true saint of the ghost path." Zhou Sheng's low voice revealed a cruel will. Outside the barrier, the avatar that Zhou Sheng had left behind seemed to sense something. It turned and looked towards the peach garden. In the next moment, without hesitation, it stomped down and howled out. During this process, the avatar rapidly turned illusory. Like a shadow, it crashed into the peach garden's barrier. There was no loud collision sound as expected. Without a sound, the light and shadow directly entered the barrier, leaving a large transparent hole on it. At the edges, there were slowly wriggling traces of melting, as if it had withstood some kind of extremely high temperature. Mixed with spots of yellow and dull colors, it gave off a feeling of coldness and desolation. In the silver-white sealed space, Baifeng floated in the air. Countless phantoms wove together like a tide, constantly surging around him. When the peach garden's barrier was broken, a black depth suddenly appeared in the silver-white sealed space. Baifeng opened his eyes and spat out a mouthful of blood. A dark red color spread out from his chest. His robes and flesh mysteriously disappeared, forming a horrifying bloody hole in his chest. The surging phantoms around him froze, as if a key part of a precise instrument had been damaged. Taking a deep breath, Baifeng ignored the wound on his chest. He mobilized the power of the peach garden's barrier to repair the damage. But at this time, his complexion changed. Outside the peach garden, Lin Sheng, who had retreated, suddenly appeared. He looked at the barrier of the peach garden and saw the hole that had been broken. This saint did not care about his identity at all and attacked at this moment. The heavens and earth are vast and boundless. Star fragments soar through the heavens. Today, obey my will and destroy all obstacles before you. This is Starfall. Lin Sheng lifted his hand and pointed forward. In the next moment, dots of scarlet suddenly appeared in the sky above his head. Following closely behind was a terrifying rumbling roar, carrying with it an unparalleled speed and a ruthlessness that could destroy everything. The crimson color in the sky quickly expanded, as if a flame was burning, dyeing the entire sky red. Therefore, in the next moment, it really began to burn. The blazing, scorching flames surged violently under the sky. The meteor spat out flames, dragging a long tail behind it. Like an arrow shot from the throne of the nine heavens by a god, it headed straight for the peach garden. Its target was the hole on the barrier that had been destroyed by the clones around it. Bang, bang, bang. Earth-shattering explosions erupted one after another, accompanied by blazing flames that rose into the sky and terrifying waves of air that rolled and vibrated. It instantly attracted the attention of countless people outside the peach blossom garden. They could not help but slightly widen their eyes, revealing fear and awe. This was the strength that a true saint could erupt with. It was infinitely close to that of a legendary spiritual god. The entire peach garden barrier violently shook, falling into flames and destruction. Cracks rapidly spread outwards with a hole as the center. The silver space was instantly covered with cracks. It was clear that it had an extremely close relationship with its controller. Thus, on the surface of Bai Feng's body, countless wounds rapidly appeared on his chest and recklessly spread outwards. Massive amounts of blood gushed out. His complexion paled, and unsuppressible pain gushed out from his eyes. His breathing was rapid and labored. In the end, he was only a half-step saint, and he had just broken through not too long ago. It wasn't enough for him to display the full strength of the Peach Garden Barrier. But Bai Feng was lucky enough. If it weren't for the protection of the Peach Garden Barrier, he would have perished in the face of a true saint's all-out attack. But even if he didn't die, he was temporarily unable to continue controlling the Peach Garden Barrier. Eldest Senior Apprentice Brother's Courtyard. The courtyard walls were forcefully pushed down, revealing the peach tree that was intimately connected to Eldest Senior Apprentice Brother. Seeing its withered branches and leaves and signs of serious contamination, it was clear that all of this had been a conspiracy from the start. A heaven-shaking explosion spread out, shaking the entire peach garden. The peach blossoms that sprinkled down from the sky rapidly disintegrated into powder. There was a powerful enemy invading from the outside. Bai Feng had been severely wounded. Kacha! Kacha! Giant cracks appeared in the sky above everyone's heads, like the gaping maws of a monster. These cracks represented destruction and slaughter, able to swallow all. This was a sign that the Peach Garden Barrier was on the verge of collapse. A deep, cold, and evil voice sounded out from the room. This is the unavoidable end of the Peach Garden, and all of you will follow it into complete destruction. Bang! A wild strength erupted. After withstanding the continuous bombardment, the house that was on the verge of collapse collapsed, revealing everything within. Eldest Senior Apprentice Brother had blood-red eyes, blood-red hair, and a net of blood wove around him, nearly wrapping around him. But now, he revealed a pained expression, and blood seeped out from every orifice of his head. His body shivered, and the net of blood that wove around him began to dim. Behind him, Zhou Sheng, who was almost sticking to him, curled his lips into a cold smile. I have to admit that I underestimated you. You did have a chance to escape, but you were too hasty. I just purposely revealed an opening. Now, nothing can be changed. 100 battles in the wild roared out loud. Gold runes rapidly appeared on the surface of his body. At the same time, his body rapidly expanded, growing to 1,000 feet in the blink of an eye. An ancient, dignified, and powerful aura erupted from his body. Blood red and gold wove together in his eyes, revealing a chaotic and horrifying aura. It gave off a horrifying feeling. His feet slammed into the ground, and he punched out. A golden river suddenly appeared, rushing towards Zhou Sheng. In the end, the so-called revived divine spirits are nothing but a bunch of pitiful worms abandoned by time and the world. I don't know what you're borrowing from, but you are able to erupt with nearly peak strength for a short period of time. But this is still not enough to contend with me. Zhou Sheng, who was shrouded in ghostly qi, raised his hand and punched out. A terrifying phantom of white bones instantly condensed, turning into a giant white bone arm. It struck out heavily, colliding with the golden river. Almost in an instant, the entire river was snapped in half. It was clear that Zhou Sheng, who had swallowed a portion of his eldest senior brother's strength, had become even more terrifying. The thousand-faced assassin screamed. Mist suddenly filled her body, and countless phantom images appeared on her blurry face. Each of these phantoms was an extremely beautiful woman's face. They flashed and reappeared quickly, and there seemed to be no end to them. She grabbed at the mist and tore it apart. Her body trembled as if she was enduring intense pain. A mass of mist was cut off by her, and she threw it at Zhou Sheng. It exploded in midair, turning into the face of a beautiful woman. Her watery eyes stared at Zhou Sheng, and a charming smile appeared on her lips. She exuded a breathtakingly seductive aura. Zhou Sheng's eyes that burned with black flames froze for a moment. But in the next moment, He had already broken free from the power that was restricting his soul. He diabolically grinned. He opened his mouth and sucked in a deep breath. A mutated, resentful spirit. It's similar to a curse. Ha! The disciples of the peach garden are truly extraordinary. The eyes of the beautiful woman formed by the mist suddenly widened, as if she had discovered something extremely horrifying. Her beautiful face paled. She screamed and tried to escape, but she couldn't control herself at all. She flew into Zhou Sheng's mouth. Her screams came to an abrupt end. The mist around the thousand-faced assassin shattered with a loud bang, like a popping bubble. Her pitiful appearance was revealed. All of her naked flesh seemed to have been corroded by a strong acid. Her bright red flesh and blood flowed down its surface, flowing with mucus. But soon, as her flesh and blood wriggled about, all of her terrifying wounds rapidly healed. What appeared in front of everyone was another beautiful face. Her skin was as white as snow and seemed as if it could be broken by the slightest breeze. Her skin was as white as snow and seemed as if it could be broken by the slightest breeze. Compared to the horrifying scene just now, it formed a sharp contrast. Shua, the thousand-faced assassin, opened her eyes. She stood up as if she hadn't been seriously injured, but the feeling she gave off had changed. She was colder and more distant. It was like when the mist was swallowed by Zhou Sheng. She had lost something extremely important to her. Save eldest senior apprentice brother, the 5 elemental Iron Mountain, the 6 elemental Earth, and Lei Xiaoyu didn't hesitate to attack the true saint. But their strength was far too weak. Before they could even touch Zhou Sheng, they were annihilated by the invisible aura around him. White Phoenix had been severely wounded when the barrier of the peach garden was broken. Second senior apprentice brother was unable to cause any damage, and the thousand-faced assassin had suffered unknown injuries. As for the others, none of them were able to help. The people of the peach garden had fallen into a desperate situation. At this time, there was a sudden cough followed by the faint sound of footsteps. This sound should have been completely covered up, but for some reason, it was clearly transmitted into everyone's ears. The figure of the peach garden appeared not too far away. Her complexion was pale to the extreme, even seeming transparent. She was like a thin layer of ice that was rapidly melting as the temperature rose. Perhaps in 2 hours, perhaps in an hour, or perhaps in the next moment, she would vanish forever. Zhou Sheng's eyes fell on her. His pupils shrank, and he lifted his hand. Die. This was the translation of information that Zhou Sheng received. In truth, what came out of his mouth was a series of complex and strange syllables. This wasn't the language of the living, but a voice from the world of death, one that signified the ultimate destruction. Peach Girl's eyes were calm and indifferent, without the least bit of emotion. It was as if she hadn't even noticed the arrival of the true saint's finger of death. Between coughs, she said in a soft voice, "Second senior apprentice brother." 100 Battles in the Wild's 1,000-foot-tall body stood in front of Peach Girl like a golden mountain. Rich golden light shot into the heavens. Bang! The golden light fiercely caved in, as if it had withstood the impact of some terrifying strength. At the same time, where the two sides came into contact, there was the sound of intense corrosion. Thick black smoke rose up, and the golden light rapidly dimmed. On the surface of 100 Battles in the Wild's body, his flesh and blood began to show signs of drying up. His color turned gray, as if he had lost all vitality. But his body still stood firmly on the ground, not moving at all as he blocked the full might of the finger of death. Peach Girl raised her hand and touched the space between her eyebrows. A halo appeared, and her almost transparent face suddenly became even paler. Her whole person was like a shadow, and it became more and more faint. She pushed forward. The moment the halo left her palm, it instantly burst into endless light, and a powerful aura shot up into the sky. The shadow of a sky-supporting peach tree emerged in the light, and the eyes of all the disciples of the peach garden suddenly lit up. This was the aura of the great path of the Yard Master. A figure appeared in the shadow of the sky-supporting peach tree. Although it was extremely blurry, the disciples of the peach garden could still recognize it at a glance. It was the yardmaster. However, the eyes of the figure were chaotic and vacant, and it was obvious that it didn't have its own consciousness. A trace of pain appeared in Peach Girl's eyes, but it soon disappeared. She said softly, "Father, please help eldest senior brother out of danger." The yardmaster suddenly moved. He raised his hand and clenched it. The peach garden's barrier above his head, which had been violently shattered, was instantly restored to its original state. At the same time, a terrifying and destructive aura appeared in his hand, and he slashed forward without any hesitation. With a scream, Zhou Sheng, who was behind eldest senior brother, was directly cut into two. He struggled and fell to the ground, turning into billowing black smoke and disappearing. Pow! With a soft sound, the yardmaster's figure disappeared, along with the dazzling light and the shadow of the sky-supporting peach tree. Chapter 14:21. At this moment, all the disciples of the peach garden had a glimmer of understanding. What they saw before them was the last bit of power that the yardmaster had left in this world. It meant that his life of dominating Haoyang had come to an end. Sorrow inevitably gushed out from the bottom of their hearts, shrouding their minds. But in reality, they had no time to immerse themselves in it, because Lin Sheng had already barged in. He stepped through the void, majestic and powerful like a god. His eyes were filled with cold oppression that enveloped everyone. Just like before, this true sage was not someone who cared too much about his status. Hence, without any hesitation, he chose to attack directly. His target was Peach Girl. When he tore apart the barrier of the peach garden and stepped inside, Lin Sheng saw with his own eyes that Peach Girl had used the power of the great path of the yardmaster to kill Zhou Sheng with a single strike. Although it was almost impossible for Peach Girl to attack again in her current situation, caution was a virtue that would never go out of style. He did not want to make the same mistake again. Moreover, since he had chosen to attack, he could not leave any of the peach garden's direct descendants alive. There was no need to explain the principle of cutting weeds at their roots. The eldest senior brother's figure moved and instantly disappeared. He appeared in front of Peach Girl and pressed his hand forward. Strictly speaking, he was now also a true saint. But the moment he had broken through, he had been tricked by Zhou Sheng and had been swallowed up. The power that he could erupt with now was extremely limited. With a loud bang, the eldest senior brother was sent flying. A large area of space was shattered as he chased after him like a dancing spear. In the blink of an eye, he was drenched in blood. Countless wounds appeared on his body. In the blink of an eye, the eldest senior brother had become a bloody gourd. The thousand faces flew out and hugged him. Unable to withstand the impact, he was sent tumbling away. The indifference in her eyes turned into a trace of pain. Then, just as she frowned, her face suddenly changed. It was still beautiful and charming, but there was a hint of coldness in the depths of the thousand faces' eyes. After his attack was blocked, Lin Sheng did not hesitate. He did not chase after the eldest senior brother and the eldest senior brother who had been sent flying. He raised his hand and continued to attack Peach Girl. An extremely rich and dazzling golden light suddenly became the only color in the peach garden. It plated the surface of all objects with a layer of gold. 100 Battles in the Wild's entire body seemed to be burning. At the same time, what appeared in everyone's nostrils was actually a rich aroma of wine. Eldest senior brother, who was hugging Thousand Face, was frowning because of her sudden change of expression. At this moment, his pupils suddenly shrank. Oh no, second junior brother touched that thing in the wine cellar. The wine cellar of the peach garden used the countless peach blossoms in the peach garden to continuously produce top-quality peach blossom wine. It was the best wine in the world, not only because of the wine's quality, but also because it was beneficial to the cultivation of cultivators. The peach blossom wine was extremely popular and was considered a hard currency in the Holy Tao Circle. However, the wine cellar was in the peach blossom garden. Although it wasn't clearly marked, it was undoubtedly a forbidden area. Apart from the yard master, only eldest senior brother and second senior brother were qualified to enter. Even a most beloved Peach Girl had never stepped foot into it. Therefore, only eldest senior brother could understand what had happened to Baijian Yuye. The golden light was resplendent and dazzling, bringing with it endless majesty and pressure. However, Lin Sheng felt something else from it. It fused with the golden light, ancient and gloomy, revealing a bloodthirsty and devouring desire. As the fragrance of the wine entered his body through his mouth and nose, Lin Sheng's consciousness was momentarily dazed. It was as if he was in a cold and gloomy wilderness. The howling wind brought with it a bone-piercing chill that penetrated into his body through his pores, as if it wanted to freeze and devour his soul. Lin Sheng's eyes focused, and bright light burst forth. Following his intuition, he didn't want to collide with Baijian Yuye. His figure moved and disappeared. The next moment, he appeared beside Peach Girl. With Peach Girl's current state, she couldn't pose any threat to a saint. She posed no threat to a saint, but for some reason, Lin Sheng could still feel a terrifying threat from her. Furthermore, as time passed, that feeling grew stronger and stronger. Because of this, Lin Sheng didn't hesitate to attack and tried to kill Peach Girl as quickly as possible. There was something wrong with Baijian Yuye. He should have used the most terrifying sealed artifact in the Peach Garden. If he wasn't mistaken, it should be the rumored thing that the yard master had trapped in the wine cellar. Lin Sheng had also heard some rumors about this thing. It was an inauspicious, horrifying, and dangerous object. In the past, even a powerful yard master could only choose to seal it away after obtaining it, and use the Peach Garden's wine cellar to slowly extract and use its strength. Unless absolutely necessary, Lin Sheng didn't want to entangle himself with it. He didn't want to be contaminated by its aura and end up encountering unpredictable dangers. As his thoughts raced, Lin Sheng didn't hesitate. He lifted his hand and pressed it towards Peach Girl. Lei Xiaoyu suddenly shouted out loud. Her hands formed seals. Replace. Bang! Lin Sheng's strike came crashing down. Peach Girl, who should have died a violent death, suddenly turned into a puppet and was torn to pieces by the wild strength. And Peach Girl's figure appeared behind Iron Mountain and Earth Element. Beside her, Lei Xiaoyu spat out a mouthful of blood, her body tottering. Rescuing someone from a true saint naturally came with a price. But she only spat out a mouthful of blood. Comparatively speaking, this was a very light price to pay. Golden light recklessly erupted, as if a great sun had descended. It completely covered up 100 Battles Wild's figure, so no one could see the golden runes that were being rapidly corroded by the blood-red light on his body. This allowed him to obtain an extremely formidable strength, but his consciousness was beginning to be contaminated. If not for his firm will, he would have long since become a puppet controlled by the sealed artifact. Seeing Lin Sheng avoid killing Peach Girl, 100 Battles Wild roared out loud. Terrifying golden light erupted, stacking up like magma as it tried to swallow Lin Sheng. From the very beginning, this had been a part of his plan. His master had already clearly informed him of how terrifying the sealed artifact in the wine cellar was. Thus, when he used it, 100 Battles Wild had already expected that he would inevitably meet his end. Thus, he wanted to drag Lin Sheng into this mess. As long as he succeeded, it would be difficult for him to escape, and he would no longer be able to cause any harm to the Peach Garden. To perish together. This was probably the last thing that 100 Battles Wild could do for the Peach Garden, for his fellow disciples, juniors. However, a saint's intuition was extremely powerful and could detect danger in advance. Lin Sheng had clearly sensed the strange aura of the sealed artifact and didn't want to fight him at all. The golden light recklessly spread out like a tide. Before Lin Sheng could be sucked into it, he took a step forward and disappeared. A true saint was naturally well-versed in the Tao of space. It was almost impossible to lock onto him if he was focused on dodging. The next moment, he reappeared. Lin Sheng raised his hand and pressed down. Lei Xiaoyu was powerless to continue using a substitute. Tai Shan and Tu Xing, who were standing in front of Peach Girl, roared at the same time. The bones in his body crackled. Taishan's body suddenly grew in size. His exposed skin revealed a thick metallic hue. At the same time, Tu Xing pressed his hands behind his back. A rich earthen yellow light erupted, covering his body layer after layer. Lin Sheng frowned, and a gloomy look flashed in his eyes. He hadn't expected that the disciples of the Peach Garden would have the courage to resist a true saint. More importantly, their resistance had actually been effective. A true saint had attacked repeatedly, but they hadn't even been able to touch a single hair on Peach Girl. Losing face was only a small part of it, because Lin Sheng didn't care about such superficial things. What he was truly angry about was the uneasiness that was rapidly accumulating in his heart after his repeated attacks had failed. It was as if something terrible was about to happen. What could it be? The disciples of the Peach Garden were no threat to him at all. Even if they could barely resist for now, it was only a matter of time before they were killed. Could it be that the Peach Garden Master had other trump cards hidden in the Peach Garden? No. If that was the case, she would have already used them to help the Peach Garden's first disciple smoothly break through to the true saint realm. She wouldn't have waited until now. Or could it be that Xinyu was coming back? Thinking of this, Lin Sheng's heartbeat accelerated. He took a deep breath and steadied his mind. They hadn't warned him, so it wasn't likely that he would come back. After all, that person was still detecting the changes in his aura. Moreover, what could he do even if he came back? After all, they were the ones who wanted to move against the Peach Garden today. He didn't want to think about it anymore. He had to end this quickly. Lin Sheng's eyes turned cold, and he increased the strength of his attacks. The layers of earthy yellow light around Iron Mountain only lasted for a moment before they were shattered. Earth Element spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent tumbling backwards. Iron Mountain had only lasted a breath of time longer than him, but he had also paid a greater price. Large tracts of his flesh cracked open, creating terrifying wounds that were so deep that bones could be seen. Thus, one could clearly see that his flesh had been broken into countless pieces. With just a single strike, Lin Sheng had nearly killed Iron Mountain and Earth Element. If his targets had been the two of them, he could have easily killed them with a single strike. Lei Xiaoyu wiped the blood from the corners of her mouth and struggled to stand up. Peach Girl reached out and pulled her back. Her expression was indifferent and without the least bit of fear. She said in a soft voice, "Don't worry about me." She no longer coughed, and a faint blush even appeared on her pale face. But the more she looked like this, the more one had a bad premonition. Lei Xiaoyu's eyes turned red, and she couldn't help but bite her lips. Senior Apprentice, Sister Peach. Peach Girl's lips curved up in a faint smile. If there's a chance, find a way to survive, and tell Qin Yu who your enemy is. The restlessness in Lin Sheng's heart became increasingly thick. For some reason, he couldn't suppress his anger. He coldly sneered, "So what if Qin Yu returns?" In this seat's eyes, the so-called 9 in the Peach Garden who are like the midday sun is just a joke. Let alone the fact that he isn't here today. Even if he does return, he will only be destroyed along with the Peach Garden. There was no need to waste time arguing with them. Those people were doomed to die, so the sooner they were killed, the sooner things would end. Lin Sheng lifted a hand, and a phantom appeared in his palm. One could faintly make out the outline of a sword. It was blurry, but it constantly released an icy cold and annihilating aura. If he wanted to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots of the Peach Garden, then killing Peach Girl was undoubtedly the most important task. Lin Sheng didn't want to leave behind any hidden dangers in the future because of his own carelessness. So, since he had to kill them, he had to use the most foolproof method. If one died beneath the shadow sword of the dead, their soul would be instantly dismembered and then swallowed up by the shadow sword, leaving nothing behind. Like this, even if a ruler were to take action in the future and forcefully reverse the river of time, they still wouldn't be able to revive them. Whoosh! The shadow sword whistled through the air as it cut towards Peach Girl and Lei Xiaoyu. In this intensely restless state, Lin Sheng believed that it was best to kill them as efficiently as possible. But just as the shadow sword was about to cut through their bodies, Lin Sheng's pupils violently shrank. His soul instinctively screamed as the thick shadow of death shrouded his mind. If he continued to attack, he could kill Peach Girl and Lei Xiaoyu, but there was a high chance he would also die on the spot. A saint naturally cherishes life. Lin Sheng drew back. He lifted a hand and thrust out, causing space to violently shake like a raging tide in a raging sea. However, before this spatial tsunami could truly erupt, it was like a fragile bubble that was directly pierced through. I've returned. I want to see just how you will destroy the Peach Garden. Chapter 1422. Lin Sheng's pupils constricted as his face contorted. It wasn't that he was a coward and was scared stiff by a single sentence. Instead, a fist drilled out from the space that had been pierced. Light surged on its surface, giving off a jade-like feeling. It ignored the obscure aura around Lin Sheng and landed on his chest. Violent, destructive energy surged out. His chest immediately caved in. Although no sound could be heard, many of his ribs must have been broken. Fresh blood gushed out from his mouth and nose. Peach Garden 9 Xinyu. Hearing the voice and receiving a heavy punch, the uneasiness in Lin Sheng's heart finally cleared up. The first thought that came to his mind was that they had purposely set up a trap for him. Their target had probably been him from the very beginning. First, misjudging the barrier of the Peach Garden was one of them. Second, not knowing that the head disciple of the Peach Garden wanted to break through 2 realms was the third. With the strength of that person in the darkness, if he really locked onto the location of the Peach Blossom Garden, he would be able to sense any changes in his aura. It would be impossible for him not to sense Qin Yu's return. However, even at this moment, he had already suffered a heavy punch, yet he still hadn't received any warning. As the saying goes, it can happen once, twice, but not thrice. There was definitely a problem here. They wanted to borrow the hands of the Peach Garden to complete the hunt for me. Thinking of this, Lin Sheng's heart began to panic. He was truly afraid. That was because he knew very well exactly what sort of person he was facing. Lin Sheng's figure was blasted back by the powerful force, and blood spurted out from his mouth and nose. At the same time, Lin Sheng turned around and left. He was extremely decisive. The reason that prompted him to make this decision was, of course, their malice. Even if he was the true saint of the Nirvana realm, a top-notch, peerless master of the world, he did not have the slightest confidence to resist. Secondly, there was the strength that Qin Yu had erupted with. Although it was only a single fist, it gave off a feeling of invincibility. Outside the Lost Garden, Qin Yu had joined forces with the Garden Master to slaughter the Netherworld Saint, allowing him to become a formidable existence that could stand on equal footing with a true saint. But in fact, at the level of a saint, most of the credit was given to the Yardmaster. They believed that Qin Yu might be powerful, but at most, he only possessed a small portion of the ability that could rival a true saint. In the end, not everyone was like the Eastern Sea Dragon Sage, who was able to clearly understand the strength that Qin Yu possessed. Lin Sheng discovered his own mistake. He hadn't given Qin Yu enough attention, but soon he would discover that his mistake was far greater than he had imagined. If the true saint of the Nirvana realm wanted to retreat and escape, even if he were to face several people of the same level as him, there was a high probability that he would be able to escape. At most, he would have to pay a price. Only sovereigns could directly seal off a part of the world and turn it into a cage. Only then could they seal off all paths of escape, making it impossible for saints to escape. Qin Yu wasn't a ruler, but he had a way to stop Lin Sheng from fleeing without hesitation. As Lin Sheng was running away, his complexion suddenly changed. He turned around and saw that Qin Yu had appeared beside him, his face expressionless. Throughout the entire process, there was no fluctuation of aura at all. If not for the fact that a true divine's senses were strong enough, he wouldn't have been able to detect it. What kind of technique is this? The answer was the hidden god. The Zeroth world was one of the 5 inherited divine abilities obtained from the ruler's residence. If the ruler's avatar were to vaguely remind him, it would be extremely troublesome. However, reality proved that the sovereign's avatar was a liar, so her words were naturally untrustworthy. Of course, even if this was true, that was a matter for the future. It was impossible for Qin Yu to abandon a powerful inherited divine ability that he had already obtained just because of a few words from her. Returning to the main point, the so-called hidden god referred to restraining one's divine sense and using one's body as a furnace to constantly temper it, making it stronger and stronger. Strong. But the divine abilities of a ruler weren't ordinary. Hidden god wasn't just limited to this. There was another meaning to it. Or perhaps it could be called a transliteration, hiding. By using one's divine sense as a guide, after locking onto a target, one could stick to their aura and move with it, becoming like a shadow following a body, quietly escaping danger without being detected. This was similar to the ability to defend oneself with a shield. Because Qin Yu's cultivation was shallow, he didn't know the specifics. But when he gathered all 5 inherited divine abilities into one, he had a faint intuition that these 5 divine abilities weren't separate entities. Rather, they were connected to each other, or rather, they fused together and complemented each other. But this wasn't the important point. The important point was that Qin Yu knew the answer, but he wouldn't tell Lin Sheng, nor would he tell him. The moment he returned, he had already decided that he wouldn't let this old brat go. He would smash him to pieces. As his fist punched out, Qin Yu was like a jade statue. His entire body surged with light, giving off an ancient and formidable feeling. Lin Sheng had already suffered a loss. So, as he saw Qin Yu punch out, he didn't hesitate at all. His figure flickered, wanting to continue retreating. But at this time, he discovered that the air around him was incomparably thick, turning into some powerful imprisonment that covered him within. The more he struggled, the stronger the shaking imprisonment power became, firmly suppressing him and making it impossible for him to dodge. Seeing the fist howl towards him, Lin Sheng clenched his teeth in anger. He crossed his hands in front of him, and with a dull thumping sound, as if a great bell had been struck, the phantom of a great bell appeared and covered him. Qin Yu's fist smashed into the phantom of the bell. The object trembled and then violently shook. Invisible shock waves crashed into it, causing Lin Sheng's complexion to change again and again. His eyes were filled with anger and even more fear. Defense was equal to jade, and it was still a transliteration of furnace. This was probably the reason why, when Qin Yu attacked, his entire body seemed to be made of jade. And what imprisoned Lin Sheng, making it difficult for him to escape, was the shield defense. The word defense itself had the meaning of restriction. But here, Qin Yu had reversed its ability and pulled Lin Sheng into the supernatural ability. But he wasn't the master of the supernatural ability, so while he obtained the defense, he also had to withstand its restrictions. Of course, this had great limitations. He had to use it at close range in order to smoothly pull the enemy in. Otherwise, with the keen senses of a saint, he would immediately be able to dodge. Only by using it together with a hidden divinity could it have such a powerful effect, causing Lin Sheng to directly fall into it. "You can't escape," Qin Yu icily said, giving Lin Sheng a powerful psychological pressure. At the same time, he punched out. The defense attack seemed simple, as if it was just a jade-like appearance, but actually contained countless mysteries and power. This was what it meant to turn the complex into the simple. Every fist contained a terrifying power, and Lin Sheng was well aware of this. Dong! The bell phantom violently shook. It was originally an illusory and invisible object, but now it was forcefully bestowed with some kind of substantialized strength. The signs that appeared were that, as the bell phantom shook, it began to rapidly solidify. And once it became solid, it would find it difficult to resist the invading strength that came from the shaking. Kacha! Kacha! Cracking sounds rang out one after another. Lin Sheng's complexion changed again and again. He knew that he had underestimated Qin Yu's strength, but he never imagined that this Peach Garden 9 would have so many strange methods. As a true saint of the other shore, he was actually suppressed in front of Qin Yu, unable to even escape. Bang! The third fist smashed apart the bell phantom. Lin Sheng spat out blood once more, the fear in his eyes no longer visible. He couldn't hide it. He never imagined that today, in a situation where he hadn't even seen the ruler, he would end up in such a pitiful state. Zhou Sheng, if you don't help us, then both of us will die here today. The moment his scream fell, the pale Zhou Sheng appeared. Although he had a way to avoid the killing blow from the Garda Master Great Dao, he had still paid a heavy price to do so. As for Lin Sheng, he clearly knew of this ahead of time. Were these two people colluding with each other? Or was there something else going on? Zhou Sheng's complexion was dignified and a sharp light exploded in his eyes. His figure flickered, but he didn't rush towards Qin Yu. Instead, he chose to attack Peach Girl. Besiege way to rescue Zhao. This could be interpreted as such. He had clearly sensed that Qin Yu was placing some importance on him. Big brother Qin. Lei Xiaoyu screamed out in panic. The pleasant surprise in her eyes froze, turning into endless fear. Lin Sheng took a deep breath. He stared at Qin Yu. As long as Qin Yu helped him, he would immediately find a chance to escape. Ha! Qin Yu snapped his fingers. As Zhou Sheng rushed towards Peach Girl and Lei Xiaoyu, his complexion changed. He reared his head back and roared. Billowing black energy erupted outwards. Countless ghosts screamed and howled, wildly tearing at the surrounding void. But soon, Zhou Sheng's complexion became incomparably ugly. He was being imprisoned by an invisible force and was being forcefully pulled towards Qin Yu. Did you think that I didn't discover you? Qin Yu sneered. He slammed his hands together, and the two defensive shields fused together. What it could do was not only increase his own defense, but it could also be used on others. What Qin Yu did was to lay down a defensive shield in front of Peach Girl and Lei Xiaoyu, and then wait for Zhou Sheng to come to him on his own. Otherwise, if he suddenly attacked, it would have been very difficult to imprison two true saints at once. It was because of this that Qin Yu deliberately allowed Zhou Sheng to sense that he was paying extra attention to Peach Girl. If it weren't for this, how could this ghost path true saint obediently fall into his trap? Lin Sheng and Zhou Sheng were both shocked and angry. With their intelligence, they naturally understood that Qin Yu had long since intended to kill the two of them. This was why he had made such an arrangement. He actually dared to fight against two true saints with just one strike. How arrogant was he? Let's work together and kill him. As they roared, the two true saints attacked at the same time. After witnessing Qin Yu's strange and powerful techniques, they indeed had no confidence in killing him alone. But if the two of them worked together, with the addition of one true saint and one true saint, they might be able to kill Qin Yu. Of course, more importantly, the situation was already clear. Qin Yu was not willing to let them go, so that they could only give it their all. If they killed him, everything might still go back on track. Perhaps this was their arrangement, or rather, their choice. If they put Qin Yu together with the two of them, no matter who survived in the end, they would be able to get what they wanted. In the corner of their eyes, Lin Sheng and Zhou Sheng's eyes flashed with anger at the same time. It was obvious that they had thought of the same thing. Of course, Qin Yu did not know what the two true saints in front of him were thinking. But this was not important because he did not care at all, because the dead did not need to understand. He wanted to kill the true saints not only because of the damage they had done to the Peach Garden, but also because of another important reason. Vast Yang was already in chaos, and a great change was about to happen. Qin Yu had to use blood as a warning to bring peace to the Peach Garden. Without a doubt, the death of the two true saints of the Nirvana realm was enough. Chapter 1423. As long as one walked, they would leave behind a trace, and these traces could be seen as a shadow beneath their feet. No one could escape their own shadow, and no one could hide the traces they left behind. But everything in this world had limitations and limits. Any objective truth would inevitably become a part of it. In other words, exceptions always existed. It was just that you hadn't come into contact with them yet, or perhaps you didn't have the qualifications. The shadowless stood aloof from the world and jumped out of the rules. Thus, it was impossible to record them, and they wouldn't leave behind any traces of themselves. And in order to have the qualifications to do this, one had to be at the ruler realm. Or One had to possess some sort of power at the ruler level. Without a doubt, Qin Yu, who had returned to the Peach Garden without causing any fluctuations, was clearly a shadowless. On the round platform in the Grand Hall, the two black-robed people who had worked together to pollute the Peach Garden's first disciple's aura and nearly caused him to break through were now respectfully kneeling. The originally dark and hazy Grand Hall now had an even more obscure feeling. In the darkness, strange whispers spread out and entered the ears of the two people. After several breaths of time, the whispers vanished. The candlelight in the Grand Hall became slightly brighter than before. The two people kneeling on the round platform stood up. Large black robes covered their bodies from head to toe. It was impossible to see their expressions, but one could still feel a trace of solemnity. Shadowless. A deep and low voice sounded out from beneath the black robes. Although it seemed extremely light, it also seemed to hide countless emotions. The black-robed figure lightly said, "Everything in this world is fair. There are gains and losses. If you want this chance, then I will give it to you." Humph. Sometimes opportunities also mean dangers. If you're willing to give it up on your own initiative, then you must have sensed something. The black-robed figure was silent for a moment. "If you're willing to share it, then I will owe you a favor." The black-robed figure shook his head. "If I was really prepared, I wouldn't have given this chance to you. There is danger, but it isn't clear. There is no need for you to probe me." The black-robed figure's eyes narrowed, revealing a scrutinizing look. But in the end, he didn't find anything. "Then let me take a look and see just what sort of secrets Peach Garden 9's Qin Yu is hiding." Within the shield, Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng had ugly complexions. Their eyes were gloomy and cold, and they couldn't help but feel a trace of fear in their hearts. They had already acknowledged Peach Garden 9's strength, but now they discovered that he was far stronger than they had imagined. This was not referring to the cultivation level of the other party, but rather to the other party's strange, yet incomparably powerful techniques. The two true sages were actually suppressed even after working together. No, using the word suppression to describe it was not very appropriate, because if they allowed the situation to continue to deteriorate, the two sages were very sure that they would eventually be completely suppressed and killed bit by bit. He came to this conclusion because all of Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng's attempts to break the shield defense and escape from the imprisonment had ended in failure. As for the Qin Yu in front of them, his entire body surged with light, as if he were made of jade. Every punch of his contained a strength that made their hearts race. And what was most terrifying was that as time passed, the number of times Qin Yu attacked increased, and the strength of each fist grew increasingly strong. It was as if he was using the two true sages as experimental subjects to continuously deepen and strengthen his control over this technique. It was simply terrifying. It was clear that Qin Yu hadn't been able to fully grasp the full might that could erupt from the jade body. No, looking at the progress he had made, this was only an extremely limited portion of its true might. There was no need for complete control. As long as he could take another step forward and raise his control to a new level, his lethality would skyrocket. Although there didn't seem to be any terrifying signs right now, Qin Yu was progressing with every passing moment. When these tiny improvements piled up together, there would eventually be a qualitative change. At that time, the only thing that awaited the two of them would probably be being imprisoned and beaten to death. Since he had already predicted this tragic and terrifying ending, as a true Nirvana saint, he was naturally unwilling to sit still and wait for death. Zhou Sheng took a deep breath. "We can't delay any longer. We have to get out of here as soon as possible." As soon as he said this, his face showed that he was in pain, and he growled in a low voice. Black gas burst out from the pores all over his body. At the same time, all the exposed flesh and blood on the surface of his body quickly rotted and melted. Then, as if thrown into a flame, they were quickly burned to ashes, and then more black gas burst out. In the blink of an eye, all of Saint Zhou's flesh and blood had disappeared. The robe he was wearing had long since been completely corroded by the black mist. What appeared in the black fog was a terrifying skeleton. The bones on its entire body were pitch black, as if they were full. It seemed to have swallowed sticky ink. No, it was more accurate to say that this was a skeleton where all of its flesh and blood had disappeared, but its organs were perfectly preserved. A thick, translucent membrane completely wrapped around the organs in its abdominal cavity. One could faintly see their wriggling movements, as well as the powerful beating heart. Within its empty eye sockets, black flames burned. Black fog lingered around its body. This skeleton was like a soul-reaping messenger from hell. It opened its mouth and emitted a silent scream. A terrifying soul attack was like a sharp thorn that crazily shot toward Shinyu. The sun-moon force field that rose from the east and set in the west violently shook. It was like countless boulders were tumbling into the water under a landslide. Within the purple moon and blue sun, there were light cracking sounds, as if they couldn't withstand the strength and were on the verge of shattering. Two illusory female faces appeared on the surface of the purple moon and blue sun. They were slightly twisted, revealing pained expressions. This was the first time something like this had occurred. It also proved how powerful a true Nirvana saint was. The soul attack that erupted from him was actually able to directly injure the purple moon and blue sun. At the same time, Qin Yu's body inevitably fell into a momentary stiffness. The pain was like countless sharp wooden stakes stabbing into his brain and constantly stirring it. He took a deep breath and stabilized his mind. He formed a seal with his hands and shouted, "Hidden Spirit." Swish, the soul aura that belonged to Qin Yu disappeared in an instant. It was as if it was covered by an invisible barrier, or as if it had directly escaped into another space that could not be reached. The terrifying soul attack from the Great Zhou Saint skeleton suddenly lost its target. But this did not mean that Qin Yu could completely block it. The soul attack from the Great Zhou Saint skeleton was greatly reduced at most, and the damage he suffered was greatly reduced. But at this moment, Qin Yu had a clear intuition. If he cultivated the hidden spirit to a high level and completely controlled its power, it would not be impossible to completely block the soul attack. Shield Guard, the power around the imprisonment suddenly changed. It was no longer as sticky as mud. Instead, it was filled with an illusory and faintly discernible aura. And it was the appearance of this aura that completely blocked the remaining soul attack from the Great Zhou Saint skeleton. What a defensive technique could block was not only the supply of physical power, but also the damage at the level of the soul. And this was far from the limit of the Shield Guard's defense. Although he only had a rough understanding of it, Qin, you could still sense the scope of its abilities. Besides physical defense and soul defense, there were also all kinds of mysterious curse-like powers within its defensive range. Of course, just like the hidden spirit, this was an ability that could only be gradually controlled after one cultivated to an extremely high level. The Great Zhou Saint puppet body could clearly feel that the impact of his soul had been blocked. The black flames in his eye sockets surged, and the black mist around him was instantly ignited. His entire person was like an evil spirit wrapped in endless black flames. The violent, terrifying, and destructive aura around him soared. Saint Lin, a strange and deep voice came from the mouth of the skeleton. It was like two hard stones violently colliding and rubbing against each other. As it spoke, the skeleton took a step forward and struck out with its hand. Gate of Perished Nations. Dong! The place where the black bone fist struck violently shook. Darkness accompanied it, rapidly spreading outwards. It was like thick ink dripping into clear water. And at the same time, an illusory gate appeared in the shaking darkness. It was translucent, and one couldn't clearly see the world behind it. Darkness and withered yellow wove together, like some endless wilderness. Strong winds howled between the heavens and the earth, occasionally outlining hideous and terrifying ghost faces. As if sensing the fluctuations of the gate of perished nations, and as if sensing the delicious smell of flesh and blood hidden behind the gate, the howling winds in the wilderness suddenly became violent. One after another, illusory and ferocious ghost faces appeared in the wild wind, and rushed towards the gate of the doomed nation. They were like giant hands that were striving to be the first to push the gate of the doomed nation open. And at this time, St. Lin acted. The reason why he was so fast was because when Great Joe Saint turned into a skeleton, he had already made preparations. He was only waiting for a signal. Between saints, there was no need to discuss things too carefully. With just a glance or a movement, they could understand each other's thoughts. Fallen stars. St. Lin raised his hand towards the gate of perished nations. A mysterious, and majestic voice came from his mouth. At this moment, he was like a monarch that controlled the heavens. All the movements of the stars had to obey his will. Therefore, in the next moment, through the gate of the perished nation, one could vaguely see that the sky above the wasteland was suddenly dyed red. Blazing meteors tore through the clouds in a cold and resolute manner, burning wantonly as they charged towards the ground. Flames and perished nations were two naturally hostile forces. The moment the burning meteors arrived, they inevitably erupted into a fierce conflict. But at this moment, Great Joe Saint's skeleton howled. The wild winds in the wilderness of perished nations suddenly rushed into the sky, directly fusing with the burning meteors. So the blazing tongues of fire instantly turned a gloomy greenish-white color, emitting a cold and ghostly aura. Between the swaying tongues of fire, ghost faces appeared one after another. Boom! Boom! With a heaven-shaking explosion, the contaminated meteors smashed into the gate of perished nations, forcefully opening it. Let's go. Great Joe Saint's skeleton growled and reached out to grab Lin Sheng. Their figures moved, directly passing through the gate and entering the world of the dead. But at this moment, a trace of fear suddenly exploded in their hearts. The two saints suddenly turned their heads and saw that the rapidly closing gate of perished nations seemed to be blocked by some invisible force. Qin Yu took a step forward, crossed the illusory gate, and directly chased after them. Whoosh! The wild winds billowed his robes, and his black hair fluttered. The incomparably powerful aura of flesh and blood of the body of rules quickly spread out. Rumble! Compared to the summoning of Great Joe Saint's skeleton, the wild winds suddenly blew up. Terrifying and ferocious faces locked onto Qin Yu with greed and fanaticism. As they howled, they swept up the wild winds and rushed towards him, wanting to devour this tempting food. A cold light exploded in Qin Yu's eyes. But at this moment his heart stirred. He flipped his palm, and a small blood jade coffin appeared. This was the ghost path treasure that he had obtained from the Avicii saint in the soulless world. At this moment, there was no need for Qin Yu to activate it. The blood jade coffin wildly expanded, and in the blink of an eye, it was thousands of feet in size. Then, the coffin opened on its own. Qin Yu didn't know if it was an illusion, but he vaguely saw a pair of blood-red eyes within. The feeling of being watched disappeared in a flash. Then, a terrifying, devouring power erupted from the blood jade coffin. The greedy and fanatical ghost faces that rushed towards Qin Yu suddenly twisted, revealing expressions of extreme fear. As they screamed, they gathered up the wild winds and prepared to flee, but they found that they had already lost control of their bodies. Their consciousness was very clear, but they could not control themselves. They could only passively continue to gather the wild winds, and the moment they approached the blood jade coffin, they were swallowed up. It was like an endless black hole, rumbling as it swallowed the ghost faces in the wind. In the blink of an eye, it formed a terrifying vortex, a secret treasure of the ghost path. Zhou Sheng's pupils violently shrank, a look of horror on his face. The ghost path had been washed away by the river of time, nearly vanishing into thin air. He had never thought of this possibility. Qin Yu of the 9 Paths of the Peach Garden was a ghost path cultivator, and his strength was extremely terrifying. This was proven by the aura and might of the blood jade coffin. Anger and disbelief wove together, and he couldn't help but feel that this was a bit absurd. But at this time, Zhou Sheng wasn't in the mood to think about such things. Let's go. Since Qin Yu was also a ghost path powerhouse, then the aura of a destroyed country was no longer a restriction to him. Rather, it could be used by him to erupt with an even greater strength. In this sort of situation, the best choice was to take advantage of the fact that he wasn't imprisoned again and flee as fast as possible. Lin Sheng also realized this. Without a word, he turned and left. The two true saints didn't separate and flee. This was because they weren't sure whether or not they could escape Qin Yu's pursuit. If the two of them joined forces, they might have a chance against Qin Yu. But if they separated, all that awaited them was death. And what happened next proved that Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng were right to be cautious. But they couldn't feel the slightest bit of comfort from this. In the midst of their rapid escape, the two true saints froze in place at the same time. They looked up at the dusky sky of the world of the dead, and their faces instantly turned pale. Then, their bodies began to tremble uncontrollably. They didn't know what was going to happen next, but their instincts gave them a great warning. In the next moment, Qin Yu's cold voice rang in their ears. Defensive attack. Chapter 1424. After all, Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng were at the peak of Haoyang Peak of the Nirvana realm. They were extremely powerful, especially Zhou Sheng, who was an elusive and unpredictable cultivator of the ghost path. With his current cultivation, he was confident he could kill them. But he wasn't confident he could guarantee that the others in the Peach Garden wouldn't suffer a counterattack before they died. So, if it was just purely killing people to establish his prestige, Qin Yu could have done it long ago. The reason why he had waited until now was because he was waiting for Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng to escape. He was waiting for them to leave the Peach Blossom Garden, waiting for them to appear in a place where they could be watched by everyone. And now, the two saints who had escaped through the gate of the Parish Nation had undoubtedly fulfilled the requirements. So Qin Yu didn't wait any longer. In fact, he couldn't wait any longer. Even though he'd only glanced at Peach earlier, he'd already noticed that she was in a bad state. He had to deal with the two saints as soon as possible so that he could return to the Peach Blossom Garden and stabilize her condition. So at this moment, Qin Yu attacked without hesitation. He erupted with the strongest attack he had ever grasped. The word defense could be translated as jade, but since it was called defense, it meant that the word defense was the essence. And since Qin Yu wanted to kill them to establish his prestige, he naturally had to choose the most eye-catching and dazzling method. He would kill the two saints without giving them the slightest chance to resist. The stronger they showed today, the more efficient they would be in killing the saints, and the safer the Peach Garden would be in the future. Suddenly, a large expanse of crimson red appeared in the gray sky of the fallen kingdom, as if a volcano had been toppled and was pouring out endless magma. They spread wantonly, and in the blink of an eye, they ignited the entire sky. In the next moment, it really started burning. Bang, bang, bang. Amidst the terrifying sound waves that shook the hearts of the people, one meteor after another smashed through the burning sky, smashing towards the ground in a determined manner. Their target was clearly the two saints who were frozen in place, their faces pale and bodies trembling uncontrollably. Ah! Zhou Sheng roared. In his skeletal form, his voice sounded like rocks rubbing against each other. It was filled with fear and madness. At this moment, he felt an intense threat of death. He could even smell the cold and decaying scent of death. As a ghost cultivator, he wasn't unfamiliar with this smell. His soul instinctively shivered and wailed. We can't just sit here and wait for death. He had to do something, or he would really be killed today. Bang! Black flames shot into the sky, and a huge bone giant appeared. It raised its arms to protect Zhou Sheng. However, this was far from enough. The giant bone let out a pained roar, and with a light cautious sound, the space between its eyebrows ruptured. Like a gate that had been opened, countless departed souls flew out from the crack between its eyebrows. Then, in the next moment, they let out miserable screams before shattering and dissipating. They turned into a thick and viscous bloody light that covered the surface of the giant skeleton's body before being absorbed and fused with it. One after another, the souls of the deceased were so numerous that it was hard to count them all. The bloody light they formed was like a river of blood bursting through its banks. Lin Sheng. An anxious roar came from within the bloody light. Shua. Lin Sheng's figure moved, and he directly rushed toward the bloodlight. It opened up a crack on its own, allowing him to enter the giant bone's body. Without the slightest hesitation, Lin Sheng raised his hand and pointed at the sky. This place forbids the invasion of foreign objects. The laws between heaven and earth shook, and formless distortions immediately appeared, covering the entire region of the destroyed country. It was as if he was the embodiment of heaven and earth, and every word he said represented his will. As his finger fell, Lin Sheng pointed a second finger. This place forbids the burning of flames. Then a third finger. This place attracts departed souls. The laws of the world wildly twisted. But at this time in the burning skies, the howling meteor had already arrived, colliding with the first law distortion. The meteor's falling speed came to a sudden halt, as if it were blocked by an invisible strength. But this state only lasted for a short period of time before it was forcefully broken by the meteor that followed. Lin Sheng stuffily coughed, and blood flowed out from the corners of his lips. The meteor roared as it hurtled towards the second law distortion. The flames on its surface immediately dimmed, and a great deal of the annihilating aura it released dissipated. The giant skeleton roared out loud. He raised his hands above his head. With a heaven-shaking rumble, there was a series of explosions like thunderclaps. At this moment, the distant skies suddenly turned dark, as if dark clouds were rapidly spreading out. What followed was a soul-shaking despair. It was like in this darkness, there was a controller of souls, a ruler of the world of death, a formidable existence that no one could contend with. Lin Sheng's eyes flashed with joy. This was because this was the result he wanted. Thus, he had changed the law with the third sentence. He wanted to use the strength of a subjugated kingdom to stop Qinyu. Reality was better than he expected. The power of the law distortion had actually drawn in the monarch of a subjugated kingdom, an existence that stood at the peak of the world of death. Of course, this couldn't rule out the possibility that this cunning and callous monarch of a subjugated kingdom had already locked onto this battle and had been hiding in the shadows. Now, he was simply taking advantage of the situation to make a move. After all, swallowing the flesh and blood of powerhouses and enslaving their souls was the eternal passion of a subjugated kingdom's monarch. As for fishing in troubled waters, that was their style of doing things. But this wasn't important. Even if the subjugated kingdom's monarch had ill intentions, the powerful Qin should still be its first choice. After all, the flesh and blood aura of a body of rules was like an irresistible poison to the departed souls. Two blood-red eyes lit up in the darkness. They were as large as lanterns and exuded a formidable pressure. As it looked down, it couldn't hide the greed in its eyes. It had been a long time since it had encountered such a delicious and tempting meal. But as the subjugated kingdom's monarch was preparing to step out of the darkness and do something, Qinyu suddenly looked up. It was like midwinter had arrived. A terrifying cold aura gushed out from the depths of its heart. The subjugated kingdom's monarch wasn't sure what methods Qinyu had. Moreover, although his aura was strong, it wasn't something the subjugated kingdom's monarch couldn't contend with. But at this moment, it felt a deep threat. It even made the subjugated kingdom's monarch feel as if it could perish at any moment. Its restless thoughts instantly vanished. The giant lantern-like blood-red eyes gazed deeply at Qinyu, as if it wanted to remember his appearance. The approaching darkness rapidly retreated, even faster than it had arrived. In the blink of an eye, it vanished from sight. Lin Sheng's eyes widened. His chest shook, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He ran a dignified, subjugated kingdom's monarch, a terrifying existence that could suppress a true saint within the subjugated kingdom's domain, had actually been scared away like this. And all of this had been accomplished with just a single glance from Qin. A cold chill gushed out from the depths of his heart, causing his complexion to pale. Lin Sheng began to confirm that attacking the Peach Blossom Garden was an extremely wrong choice from the start. The Peach Blossom Garden's Qin Yu was terrifyingly strong. He was far more terrifying than anyone had imagined. Chapter 1425. Save us. Terror invaded his mind. The smell of death was close at hand. Lin Sheng could no longer suppress his surging emotions. He opened his mouth and screamed. But this sentence inadvertently exposed a certain fact, that he and Zhou Sheng were originally in cahoots, and they had agreed to attack the Peach Garden together. Outside the Peach Garden, Zhou Sheng's action of forcing Lin Sheng to retreat was just a prearranged plot. Qin Yu frowned, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. In addition, he discovered another important piece of information. That was, Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng had a mastermind behind them, to be able to drive two true saints to attack. One could imagine the power of this mastermind. At this moment, a name appeared in Qin Yu's mind. It was a name that made one's mind tremble. Ruler. Only the highest level in this world had the qualifications to do such a thing. He took a deep breath and suppressed the shaking emotions in his heart. Now the arrow was knocked on the bowstring and had to be released. Even if he knew that the shadow of a ruler was behind them, Qin Yu could no longer stop. First, killing Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng was to intimidate all sides and create a safe environment for the Peach Garden. Second, the ruler of the vast young world had hidden away from the world, and this might have involved a higher level of influence. The yard master had occasionally mentioned this, and although she had not mentioned it in detail, it was certain that the ruler would not easily act unless it was absolutely necessary. And the most important point was the third. After the World Zeroth incident, Qin Yu was sure that he had a background. In terms of background, there was a true ruler behind him, even more mysterious, ancient, and powerful than the ruler of the vast young world. Well, of course, calling a beautiful woman Gu was a very rude thing to do. Thus, he had to quickly stop his thoughts. He didn't know whether or not that person had left some sort of mark on his body. Perhaps they really could monitor him to a certain degree. After all, as she said, she had invested a great deal in him and was even prepared to entrust him with some matters. She would not ignore his existence. In short, Qin Yu was a little afraid of attacking Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng, but not too much. At most, it would be a contest of legs. Thinking of this, the chill in Qin Yu's eyes deepened, and the killing intent in his heart soared. Since he could sense that Zhou and Lin probably had a sovereign backing them, he needed to be quick and decisive in killing them. He didn't want to give them any chance to struggle or survive. With a thought, the rumbling between heaven and earth became even more intense. The flames burned fiercely, and after the meteors tore through the air, they emitted even more ear-piercing sounds. The giant skeleton roared and brazenly collided with the falling meteorite. Violent energy immediately erupted, wantonly striking out in a ring shape. In an instant, it was as if purgatory had descended, enveloping Saint Zhou and Saint Lin. If there were only 3, 5, or even 8 or 10 meteors, the combined power of the two saints would naturally be able to withstand it. But now, there seemed to be a huge hole in the burning sky. Countless meteors pierced through it, dragging long tails behind them as they came crashing down. The distorted rules of heaven and earth still existed. They used Lin Sheng's great Tao as a foundation. Even though they were pierced through by the meteorites, as long as Lin Sheng's great Tao did not collapse, they could continue to function. On the other hand, every time a meteorite pierced through the distorted rules, it would cause a certain degree of damage to Lin Sheng. As the saying went, sand piled up into a mountain. No matter what it was, as long as it accumulated to a certain amount, it would become extremely terrifying. The great Tao of a true saint was tyrannical, but even it could not withstand the repeated damage. Lin Sheng's face grew increasingly pale, and there was an ominous blue hue to it. His body trembled and twitched as the meteors fell. But in the current situation, all he could do was grit his teeth and endure. If he collapsed, and only Zhou Sheng was left, he would not be able to withstand it. The giant skeleton's massive body was smashed into the ground. Countless hideous cracks appeared, spreading out in all directions. And at the same time, cracks appeared not only on the ground, but also on the giant skeleton's massive body. From these cracks, crimson blood flowed out like small rivulets gathering on the ground, forming a small blood lake. At this time, the surface of the blood lake rippled. Twisted and pained faces appeared before shattering and vanishing. The giant skeleton's massive body began to bend under the pressure. Its thick bone legs could not withstand the continuous bombardment. They swayed and half knelt on the ground. Kacha! Kacha! More and more cracks appeared on its bones. It had nearly reached the limit of what it could withstand. But before help arrived, it was as if the two of them had been mercilessly abandoned. Lin Sheng raised his hands. His lips trembled as he roared out, "Stars!" Stars appeared one after another in the sky, where the destroyed country was burned red by the flames, sprinkling down endless starlight. As if they were attracted by something, they gathered and covered the body of the bone giant, as if it was wearing a layer of starlight armor. In the end, a true saint was still a true saint. Unless one became a ruler and there was an insurmountable gap between them, it was nearly impossible to quickly kill it, even if one held the absolute advantage. Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng could not escape, nor could they resist the endless bombardment of meteors. The only thing they could do now was to buy as much time as possible. It was impossible for such a terrifying supernatural ability to not have a limit. Perhaps in the next second, the terrifying meteor rain from the burning heavens would stop. Or perhaps they would see an opportunity and choose to rescue them. Or perhaps help was already on the way. Although all of this was unpredictable, there was still a chance to resist. If they gave up, then the only fate awaiting them was death. Qin Yu sensed Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng's thoughts. His lips curved up in a cruel smile. Defensive strike could control the stars in the skies. This meteor rain was clear proof of this. Lin Sheng clearly knew all of this, and yet he still dared to summon stars in front of him and condense starlight into armor. In Qin Yu's eyes, this sort of behavior was no different from seeking death. Lin Sheng feared that he had been scared senseless or that this meteor rain was the limit of his control. Taking a step forwards, Qin Yu lifted his hand. His 5 fingers curled into a fist, and he grasped at the starry skies above. Defensive strike! With a loud shout, the stars in the skies shook. Lin Sheng's eyes widened, and he spat out a mouthful of blood, horror filling his eyes. He never imagined that the supernatural ability he had used on his own initiative would be forcefully interrupted. No, interrupted wasn't the right word to describe it. To be more accurate, Qin Yu had directly deprived him of the right to control his supernatural ability. Countless starlight separated from the shaking stars, gathering towards a point where it soon formed an incomparably massive spear of starlight. Whoosh! Without pause, the starlight spear howled out, crossing endless space in the blink of an eye and smashing into the bone giant's body. With the starlight spear resisting the starlight armor, this stalemate only lasted for a moment. The bone giant emitted a pained roar. With a loud, shattering sound, the starlight spear pierced through its body and nailed it to the ground. Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng had opened the gate of Perish Nation and fled into the Perish Nation's territory. This exposed their vision, and they were watched by countless eyes. And the masters of these eyes were, without exception, the peak Permethought true saints of the vast Yang world. They wanted to use the result of this battle to determine just what sort of attitude they should have towards the Peach Garden. Seeing how Qin Yu had suppressed Saint Zhou and Saint Lin with such an unstoppable force that it was impossible for them to resist, the saints were all shocked. The strength that Qin Yu possessed in the journey of the Peach Garden was far beyond everyone's imagination. With his performance today, it was enough to protect the Peach Garden in the great changes of the world. Even if the Peach Garden Master had perished, she wouldn't be harmed in the least. If this was only to determine Qin Yu's strength, then the saints had already obtained their answer. But the gazes that gathered didn't lessen. They continued to watch the perished nation, waiting for new changes to occur. This was because they had already guessed that there was someone hidden behind Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng, and someone that could drive a true saint to attack. Just thinking about this caused their hearts to chill. The world was in turmoil. As Permy thought, true saints, they all had keen antennae. They had more or less sensed something strange and subtle. Could it be that they were behind Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng? If this were true, then they likely wouldn't allow these two true saints to perish like this. Thus, there was a high chance that Qin Yu would pass through this hurdle before things would truly come to an end. This hurdle wouldn't be easy. If he wasn't careful, then the seemingly incomparably powerful Qin Yu might die on the spot. After all, there was a high chance that there was a ruler standing guard behind them. And this was also what the saints were waiting for. At this time, the gathered eyes of the saints began to fluctuate. Their distant eyes revealed a dignified look. It's here. Qin Yu also sensed the powerful aura that suddenly appeared. It was like a towering mountain that pressed down on his head. It blotted out the skies, giving off a dark and oppressive feeling. Within the giant bone that was covered in cracks, Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng's eyes popped open, wild joy in their eyes. Save us! Save us! A true saint covered his entire body in black robes stepped forwards. A terrifying suppressive aura instantly rose. The great calamity of vast Yang has arrived. No true saint can be lost. Before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted. Qin Yu's eyes were icy cold, like arrows that wanted to tear apart this person. You're the person they are waiting for? Very good. Without giving the other party a chance to speak, Qin Yu turned his hand behind him. The gate of perishing was still open, as if he had grasped onto something. Bang! An unimaginably terrifying aura erupted like a volcano. It swept out in all directions, covering everyone within. Beneath the black robes, the cold and gloomy face froze. His eyes, filled with killing intent, couldn't help but fill with fear. His first thought was that he couldn't block it, and then he would die. That's right, at this moment, the murderous black-robed true saint suddenly felt an intense threat of death. He even suspected that Qin Yu wouldn't give him a chance to say even half a word. In the next moment, Qin Yu would attack. Shua, the black-robed figure, instantly retreated. He tore through the space of the perishing kingdom and vanished beneath the eyes of the many people. At this moment, the world fell deathly silent. After a brief moment of silence, disbelief and horror appeared in everyone's eyes. Chapter 14:26. The Ninth Qin Yu. This was the ninth Qin Yu of the Peach Garden. No, from today onwards, he would undoubtedly become the new guardian of the Peach Garden. And Qin Yu had used his actions to prove that he indeed had the qualifications to replace the Garden Master. He had truly risen up and shaken vast Yang. Perished. The starlight spear pierced through the bone giant's body and nailed it to the ground. Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng revealed looks of despair. They knew that with the retreat of the black-robed true saint, their lives had come to an end. But at this moment, Qin Yu didn't relax at all. He kept his hand moving backwards, his fingers tightly clenched. His knuckles turned white and tiny blood vessels bulged out. It was like he was really holding onto something intangible. Kacha, Kacha! The open gate of perish trembled. Cracks began to appear, weaving together. Qin Yu looked up. His pupils shrank as he stared at the nothingness somewhere. The black-robed true saint had already retreated. But he felt an even more intense restlessness in his heart. It was like some terrifying existence had followed the black-robed true saint and arrived in a perished world. It was here, but it couldn't be locked onto by sight or divine sense. It was like a shadow, but it could send a person to hell at any moment. With Qin Yu's current cultivation, the only one that could give him such a terrifying feeling, as if he could be killed at any moment, was the ruler. The shocked gazes of the perished world met. They clearly sensed something from Qin Yu's expression, and their bodies began to shiver. Would the ruler's situation of seclusion change because of the arrival of the great calamity? If so, then the heavens would truly change. The true saint would still be at the peak of the world, but he would no longer have the qualifications to lead or control Vastion. The ruler would personally enter the battlefield. They would all be reduced to chess pieces. At most, they would be relatively powerful chess pieces. In the deathly silence, Qin Yu let out a long breath. The terrifying feeling of impending destruction finally faded from sight. This meant that the sovereign who had descended here had chosen to retreat in the end. Perhaps it was because the restriction of the ruler's seclusion still existed, or perhaps he had sensed the aura of that woman on Qin Yu's body. But in any case, it definitely wasn't because he feared Qin Yu's strength. This was truly an embarrassing matter. But after experiencing the ruler's malicious gaze, Qin Yu's heart tightened once more. He didn't have the heart to care about how awkward it was. Originally, he thought that with his current cultivation and strength, he would be able to look down on everyone. However, who knew that in the era of the true divine dominating Haoyang, there would suddenly be a change? Even though the sovereigns hadn't personally appeared in this world yet, there was no doubt that they had already quietly made their move. They had already begun to make arrangements in this world. If they wanted to escape the fate of becoming chess pieces, they had to become even more powerful. Bang, bang, bang. Amidst the heaven-shaking explosions, the flaming meteors continued to crash down. The giant bone monster had completely collapsed, and the auras of Zhou and Lin had vanished. Two powerful true sages had fallen just like that. Although he was a murderer, at this moment, Qin, you could still feel the cruelty and tyranny of heavenly tribulation. If he couldn't become stronger, then the one who killed him today would be Qin Yu. But perhaps one day in the future, the one who would be killed would be him. He suppressed these thoughts and steadied his mind. With a flick of his sleeves, the firmament-burning dome was quickly extinguished and the blood-jade coffin howled out, rushing into the place where the bone giant had fallen. Woo, woo. A strange and sharp sound echoed out from the blood-jade coffin. Two incomparably solid phantoms condensed in the void. These were the two sages Zhou and Lin who had just been brutally killed. Their eyes were blank and filled with a bit of resentment and resistance. But they couldn't resist the strength of the blood-jade coffin. With a deep roar, they turned into two masses of light that submerged into the coffin. Ha! The blood-jade coffin closed and flew back to Qin Yu's side. He grabbed it and put it away. After finishing this, he swept his eyes around. After determining that he hadn't left anything behind, he turned and stepped into the gate of Perished Nation. The moment Qin Yu vanished, the world around the gate of Perished Nation began to shake. A powerful repulsive strength erupted. With a loud bang, the gate of Perished Nation closed, as if it were sending away a god of plague. Peach Garden. Because the gate of Perished Nation was still open, no one could hear anything, but they could clearly see everything that happened. They saw Qin Yu scare away the ruler of the Perished Nation and the black-robed true sage. Then, he used his starlight spear to pierce through the giant bone monster, and then borrowed a meteor from the heavens to forcefully kill him. All of these scenes left everyone overwhelmed with emotion. Seeing Qin Yu step through the gate of Perished Nation and return to Peach Garden once more, Lei Xiaoyu was incomparably excited. She stepped forwards and cried out, "Big brother Qin." Just now, she really thought she would die. Qin Yu nodded to her. Then, he frowned and turned to look at the elder senior apprentice brother in the thousand-faced assassin's arms. Facing Qin Yu's gaze, the elder senior apprentice brother forced a smile. "I'm fine, Shua." Qin Yu stepped forwards and appeared at the thousand-faced assassin's side. Elder senior apprentice brother, don't resist. His eyebrows furrowed together, his complexion solemn. Everyone who had just been overjoyed suddenly paled. The thousand-faced assassin stared at Qin Yu, revealing a pained expression. Then, in front of everyone's eyes, she changed her face. The thousand-faced assassin was still beautiful and charming, but the indifference in the depths of her eyes was much deeper. Chinyu glanced at her. His eyebrows furrowed even tighter, but he didn't say anything. Seeing the elder senior apprentice brother nod, Chinyu reached out a hand and pressed it against his body. Great furnace. He could clearly see that the elder senior apprentice brother's condition was extremely poor. He had just condensed his great Tao and was already suffering heavy losses. Or, to be more precise, he had already begun to collapse. Once he couldn't stop it, all that awaited him was death. The elder senior apprentice brother hesitated, as if he already knew his own situation. But he looked at the thousand-faced assassin and then at the nervous crowd that surrounded him. He forced a smile and didn't say anything. In this world, everyone would die. No one knew what they would encounter in the future. Even someone as powerful as his honorable master would inevitably perish. So it was normal for him to welcome the arrival of death. Chinyu didn't obtain a response. The furnace's aura was normal, but it was in an extremely dispirited and listless state, as if it were a corpse. It was clear that the matter of the furnace giving birth to the great Tao had caused far too much damage to it. Even now, it still hadn't calmed down. You could understand that it would be difficult for a self-aware male to recover from the wounds caused by being forced to give birth. But the elder senior apprentice brother could die at any moment. He didn't have time to wait for the furnace to slowly heal him. Taking a deep breath, Chinyu roared out inwardly, "Furnace, this is the second time I'm calling you, and it will also be the last time. Otherwise, believe me, when it comes to giving birth, if you can do it once, then you can do it a second time." As if his but had been set on fire, or as if someone had mercilessly ripped open his wound, the silent strength of the furnace instantly began to seethe and boil. The image of him trembling in anger and gnashing his teeth appeared in Chinyu's mind. Without giving the furnace a chance to rage, Chinyu coldly said, "Since you've come back to life, then go and save him. If you can do it, I guarantee that I will never let you experience something like that again." This was probably what it meant to be beaten down with a stick and then given a carrot. This was probably the situation. Chinyu had reached the point of perfection in this. The furnace was stunned for a moment before falling silent. Chinyu actually relaxed inwardly. "Remember what you said." Vague thoughts fluctuated in his mind. It was clear that after swallowing the everlasting flame, the furnace had undergone another transformation and was now able to communicate on its own initiative. The furnace phantom appeared, absorbing strength. Seeing the thousand-faced assassin frown, Chinyu said, "Seventh senior apprentice sister, don't worry. Elder senior apprentice brother will be fine." She stared into Chinyu's eyes for several breaths of time. Then she let go of elder senior apprentice brother and allowed him to fly into the furnace phantom. Although she didn't say anything, Chinyu felt a bit of dread as she stared at him. He couldn't help but frown. The indifference in the thousand-faced assassin's eyes didn't seem normal. Thinking for a moment, Chinyu asked, "Are you confident?" The furnace's thoughts fluctuated. "I won't die." It was clear that this fellow's anger hadn't yet dissipated. However, it didn't matter whether it was angry or not as long as elder senior apprentice brother was fine. He would worry about the furnace's mentality later. Right now, the most important thing was Peach Girl. Just now, elder senior apprentice brother's condition was too dangerous, and Chinyu had no choice but to immediately deal with him. But this didn't mean that Peach Girl wouldn't have any problems. Facing Chinyu's eyes, Peach Girl's lips moved. "Where did my father perish?" Chinyu grabbed her hand. "I can answer all your questions, but not now." He swept his eyes over everyone. "Senior apprentice brothers and sisters, I will stabilize Peach Girl's situation first. I will leave everything else to you." After speaking, he stepped forwards and left with Peach Girl. Schwa, space twisted, and a pale white phoenix appeared. She glanced at the place where Chinyu and Peach Girl had left and smiled. "He's fine now." Everyone instantly understood what he meant. Although they had already expected this, they still couldn't help but feel happy. Their little junior apprentice brother had returned. He had killed 2 true saints with thunderous methods and revealed an incomparably powerful strength. Naturally, no one dared to have any ideas about the Peach Garden anymore. This calamity had passed. "Since my Peach Garden has passed today's trial, We must clearly remember everything that happened today. Second senior apprentice brother sneered. The Peach Garden had never been hypocritical and righteous. They never paid attention to repaying evil with good. On the contrary, starting from the Peach Garden Master, they had always held grudges. Second senior apprentice brother is right. But we can't rush this. We need time to restore order to the Peach Garden, and we also need to become stronger. Speaking to here, White Phoenix paused for a moment. She looked at everyone with a heavy expression. In the past, when Honorable Master was here, we were able to enjoy the noble status of disciples of the Peach Garden with a clear conscience and a peaceful life where no one dared to provoke us. But now that Honorable Master has passed away, and although we still have our little junior apprentice brother and sister, we don't have the face to accept our little junior apprentice brother's protection. So, it is time for us to work even harder and break through our current boundaries as soon as possible. We must strive to step into the saint realm. Second senior apprentice brother turned and left. I will immediately go into seclusion in the wine cellar. Unless absolutely necessary, don't let anyone disturb me. Schwa. His figure flickered and he vanished from sight. Within the furnace phantom, the eldest senior apprentice brother opened his eyes. He looked in the direction that 100 Battles Yi had left in and slowly said, "If 100 Battles doesn't come out in 3 days, go and ask our little junior apprentice brother to come out." Yes, eldest senior apprentice brother. Everyone nodded, their eyes complex and firm. After experiencing today's calamity, the mentality of the Peach Garden disciples had changed. Without accident, as long as they were given enough time to settle, their strength would rise at an astonishing rate. Chapter 14:27. Peach Girl's situation was very tricky. What was worse was that Qin Yu discovered that she no longer wanted to live. He opened his eyes and looked at Peach Girl in front of him. He frowned and said in a low voice, "Senior sister, don't worry. I'm back. I can protect you." Peach Girl shook her head. "Junior brother, you don't have to sacrifice yourself to save me." Deep in her indifferent eyes, a trace of pain and gloominess flashed. "I am an unlucky person. I was born to be a burden to my parents. I don't want to be a burden to anyone else in this world." Qin Yu's heart tightened. He was sure that Peach Girl already knew the truth that led to the fall of the Yardmaster. This was indeed a cruel reality. He could understand and feel the pain in Peach Girl's heart. But no matter what, he couldn't watch her abandon herself to despair. His thoughts raced. Qin Yu took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "Senior sister, since you know how you survived until now, can you bear to see the Yardmaster's sacrifice be in vain?" He stared at Peach Girl and said in a heavy tone, "Saints are nearly immortal. If it weren't for saving senior sister, the Yardmaster wouldn't have injured her foundation and weakened herself. She is doomed to die soon." Peach Girl trembled. Pain appeared in the depths of her cold and calm eyes. Qin Yu wanted to save her. He didn't want to kill her with words. So, when he saw Peach Girl's emotions fluctuate violently, he immediately softened his tone. The Yardmaster loves senior sister to the extreme. That's why she was willing to sacrifice herself to save your life. Just because of this, your life no longer belongs to you. It is also the continuation of the Yardmaster's life. How can you give up like this? If the Yardmaster knew this, she would be very sad. Peach Girl lowered her head. "If I want to live, I can only use the great Tao to prolong my life. No matter who helps me, they will only follow in my father's footsteps." Qin Yu immediately said, "Me." Meeting Peach Girl's eyes, he smiled and tried to make his voice gentle and sincere. "I'm not sure if senior sister knows, but I can tell you clearly that I cultivate the true divinity path. I don't need to explain the specifics of this cultivation system. I shouldn't have a great Tao, but under a lucky coincidence, I condensed it. I know this is very hard to believe, but I promise that everything I said is true, and there is absolutely no falsehood in it. I have to admit that condensing the great Tao will indeed increase my strength to a certain extent. However, this was just an additional gain. In other words, even if the great Tao was damaged, it would not endanger my foundation. Also, as a cultivator of the true God path, since I have the great Tao, I can repair and refine it. So even if it is damaged, it is not something that cannot be recovered. Eldest senior brother's injuries are related to the destruction of the great Tao. The furnace I summoned can save him, but it can't possibly be ineffective on me. Of course, you should be familiar with this furnace, senior sister. You met it in the endless sea. I survived because of senior sister's help, and also because of the Yarmaster's help. Finally, I was able to use this cauldron to condense the great path. One peck and one drink are almost destined, so it's only natural for me to save senior sister. This is what I owe the Yardmaster and the Peach Garden. After saying so much in a single breath, Qin Yu's mouth felt dry. It wasn't that he was thirsty, but that he was incomparably nervous. If Peach Girl was determined to die and refused to cooperate with the treatment, she would really die very soon. If she died, that would mean that all of Qin Yu's efforts would be meaningless. Ning Ling and Yu Qi would vanish without a trace, never to return. Peach Girl maintained her previous bowed posture, as if she weren't moved by his words. As Qin Yu was racking his brains, he didn't know what to say. She suddenly said, "Answer a question of mine." Qin Yu reached out a hand. "Senior apprentice sister, please speak. I can sense that you saved me for another reason." "What is that reason?" Peach Girl looked up into Qin Yu's eyes. Her heart skipped a beat. Her first thought was to hide the truth. But this thought only appeared for a moment before she suppressed it. After a brief silence, Qin Yu said, "I saved senior apprentice sister because I wanted to save someone." He looked up, a bitter smile on his face. This is a relatively long story. Today, I will briefly explain it. If senior apprentice sister is interested, once your condition stabilizes, I can tell you the details. Since he had already spoken, there was no need to hide anything. Qin Yu told her about the discovery of the myriad soul Tao in the past, as well as the relationship between Peach Girl, Ning Ling, and Yu Qi. That's how things are. So, the reason I saved senior apprentice sister is because I promised the Garden Master that I would do everything possible to protect her life, and also because I had a reason that I had no choice but to do so. The reason I didn't tell you the truth before was to avoid unnecessary trouble. I asked senior apprentice sister to understand. Across from him, Peach Girl had a calm and indifferent expression, not revealing the least bit of emotion. After several breaths of time, she slowly said, "I'll have to trouble little junior apprentice brother." Qin Yu's face lit up with joy. He hurriedly said, "Of course, there is no need for senior apprentice sister to do this." After finally convincing Peach Girl that she didn't want to die, he didn't dare to delay any longer. He reached out a hand and placed it between Peach Girl's eyebrows. The process might be a bit painful. I asked senior apprentice sister to bear with it. 2 hours later, Qin Yu withdrew his hand, his complexion pale. This was the first time he had mobilized the great Tao to save someone. He had no experience at all, and several accidents had almost occurred. Luckily, he had smoothly completed it. Across from him, Peach Girl's eyes were closed. Her clothes were soaked with sweat and clung tightly to her body, revealing her domineering curves. Qin Yu couldn't help but glance at her. He coughed and stood up. "Senior apprentice sister, your situation has stabilized. I will bid my farewells first." Peach Girl imperceptibly nodded. Qin Yu turned and left. The moment the door closed, Peach Girl opened her eyes. They were incomparably dark, and there was even a bit of bitterness in them. So it was like this. Since it was like this, then she had to give up those thoughts that she shouldn't have. Whether it was out of gratitude towards her father for risking his life to save her, or because she wanted to thank Qin Yu for saving Peach Garden today, she could no longer refuse treatment. If so, what would she live for in the future? A vacant look appeared in Peach Girl's eyes. She slowly lowered her head and fell silent. "Who?" Qin Yu let out a long breath. He turned to look at Peach Girl's residence, a bit of unwillingness on his face. The reason he had hurriedly left just now wasn't because Peach Girl's clothes were soaked in sweat, but because he didn't know how to face her again. He didn't conceal anything and told her the truth. Although Peach Girl no longer resisted treatment, it also gave the fragile Peach Girl another heavy blow. What Chinyu truly cared about wasn't whether she lived or died. Rather, he just happened to want to save the Tao companion of her divided soul. The garden master had perished, and Peach Girl no longer had anyone to rely on. Chinyu had noticed the faint changes in her emotions. He naturally understood that his current stance was a great provocation to Peach Girl. But there was no way Chinyu could explain this, because this was the truth. He stood where he was, silently sensing his surroundings. If anything went wrong, Chinyu would immediately move to stop her. He had to admit that when facing Peach Girl, he was indeed cruel. That was, no matter what Peach Girl thought, he would never allow her to die. And when a person couldn't even control their own life or death, that was undoubtedly a pitiful matter. Luckily, Peach Girl didn't give Chinyu another chance to be cruel. Her aura was extremely stable. After waiting for a moment to determine that she wouldn't take things too hard anytime soon, Chinyu looked away and quickly walked away. Although he had the Great Furnace's guarantee, Chinyu still couldn't relax. Luckily, his eldest senior apprentice brother's condition had stabilized. According to what the Great Furnace said, a newly formed and fragile Great Tao was now like a hammer that had smashed through it from top to bottom. There wasn't a single place that wasn't damaged at all. Wanting to restore it wouldn't be simple at all. Chinyu thought it was strange. From one void and two white, to half completion of the Great Tao, and then to the condensation of the Great Tao. Well, if he said this, others would surely gnash their teeth in anger. But this was the truth. The process had been easy and quick, and Chinyu hadn't even had time to react before he was finished. Although rebuilding after a disaster was much more difficult, it shouldn't be to such a degree. Chinyu suspected that the Great Furnace was taking revenge on him and was deliberately slacking off. The Great Furnace clearly sensed Chinyu's thoughts and nearly exploded with rage. I say, can you at least have a bit of common sense? Tempering the Great Tao is an action that defies the heavens and changes one's fate to begin with, something that goes against the will of the world. If it weren't for this, the one who created me wouldn't have perished on the spot and would have given a top treasure like me to you for such a cheap price. You're the one I recognized as my master, and our auras are related, so I can help you quickly temper your Great Tao. But if it were anyone else and they were to use this speed, that would be the same as pointing a middle finger at the heavens and provoking you. Just turn around and hundreds of bolts of thunder will come crashing down. Do you believe me when I say they won't turn to ashes? Chinyu lightly coughed and rubbed his nose. Although the Great Furnace's attitude was extremely nasty, his intuition told him that this fellow wasn't lying. He looked at the thousand-faced cultivator and said, "Seventh senior apprentice sister, don't worry. Elder senior apprentice brother's condition is stable and there isn't any danger to his life. He will wake up soon." For Cultivator, sleeping was also an effective form of self-protection. It could restore one's injuries at the fastest speed possible. For Elder Senior Apprentice Brother to last until he fainted was already a true man. The thousand-faced cultivator relaxed. "Thank you, Junior Apprentice Brother." He turned to look at the unconscious Elder Senior Apprentice Brother on the bed. At this time, he shouldn't disturb him any further. Quietly leaving was the best choice. But Chinyu hesitated for a moment. He said, "Seventh Senior Apprentice Sister, your condition." After a brief silence, the thousand-faced cultivator's voice sounded out. "Thank you for your concern, Junior Apprentice Brother. I am fine." Chinyu frowned, but, as if thinking of something, he didn't continue speaking. He cupped his hands together and left. He met with the other disciples of Peach Garden outside Elder Senior Apprentice Brother's courtyard. After a brief exchange, Chinyu asked Lei Xiaoyu to find some reliable maids to take care of Peach Girl. Although her condition had stabilized, she was still weak. "Senior Apprentice Brothers, I will go back and rest first. If there is anything you need me to do, feel free to send someone to find me." "All right, Junior Apprentice Brother, go and rest." He turned and left. After returning to his dwelling, Chinyu's thoughts stirred. He blocked off his senses and frowned. "Why did you stop me just now?" The stone pagoda's voice sounded out. "The thousand-faced cultivator's condition is very strange. If Master stimulates her now, there might be an accident. Chinyu asked, then what should I do? The stone pagodas said, she isn't in a rush right now. Master might as well observe her. As long as she is still in Peach Garden, you can help her at any time. Chinyu thought for a moment and nodded. That's fine. He turned and sat down. After thinking for a moment, he walked towards the training room. The courtyards of Peach Garden disciples seemed simple, but the truth was that they weren't. For instance, even if a saint were to clash with him, it wouldn't be easy to damage them. That's right. Chinyu was preparing to go into seclusion to cultivate. This wasn't because he was trying to make a last-minute effort, but because the might of the inherited supernatural powers was far greater than he had imagined. As he realized that the ruler had gone into seclusion and was on the verge of collapse, Chinyu's desire to increase his strength became increasingly urgent. Comprehending and cultivating the 5 great inherited divine abilities was undoubtedly the most effective and the most convenient method at the moment. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. There was a knock on the courtyard doors. Shwa. Chinyu opened his eyes, a sharp light flashing within them. He stood up and opened the courtyard doors with a flick of his sleeves. It was Lei Xiaoyu. There was a hint of worry on her face. As she saw Chinyu, she hurriedly said, Big Brother Chin, second senior apprentice brother, has gone into seclusion in the wine cellar. Before eldest senior apprentice brother fell asleep, he told us that if he didn't come out in 3 days, he would have you go and take a look. Chinyu furrowed his eyebrows. All right, I'll go now. Outside the wine cellar, White Phoenix and Iron Mountain were waiting. As they saw Chinyu arrive, they hurried forwards. Little junior apprentice brother, do you know what happened? Chinyu said, Senior apprentice brothers, don't worry. I will go in and take a look. In front of him was a small rockery. It seemed as if it had been struck by a heavy sword, causing a crack to appear in the center of the rockery. The crack extended all the way down to the ground. Standing here, one could smell the rich fragrance of wine. This was the hard currency of Peach Garden, the peach blossom wine. He nodded to the two and indicated for Lei Xiaoyu to wait outside. Then, his figure flashed, and he entered the crack, soon vanishing into the darkness. Chapter 1428. Looking in from the outside, the wine cellar was pitch black, but that was not the case. Not long after stepping into it, a faint light appeared before his eyes. Even though it wasn't intense, it was enough for him to see his surroundings clearly. But it seemed that there was some kind of restraining force within this wine cellar that imprisoned all the light within, not allowing even the slightest bit of it to escape. Therefore, it caused the appearance of pitch black. Chinyu focused his senses. He could faintly sense a bit of a cryptic aura, but when he wanted to go deeper, he couldn't even begin. His footsteps paused for a moment before he continued forward. The fragrance of the wine became stronger in his nose and mouth. When he breathed it in, he could feel the sweetness and allure. All the way down into the ground, the traces of excavation in the passage were not obvious. There were only a few traces left in the narrow places. It seemed that the wine cellar under the rockery in the Peach Garden was more like a natural product than a man-made one. As he moved forwards in the dim light, he suddenly heard the sound of footsteps approaching him. He raised an eyebrow and stood still. After several breaths of time, he saw his second senior apprentice brother slowly step forwards. He looked surprised. Little junior brother, why are you here? Chinyu's eyes flashed. He said, I heard that second senior apprentice brother has gone into seclusion in the wine cellar and hasn't left for 3 days, so I came to see you. Second senior brother nodded. Thank you for your concern, junior brother. I'm fine, and I'm preparing to leave now. Chinyu suddenly said, although I've been in the Peach Garden for a long time, this is my first time coming to this wine cellar, and I haven't had a chance to taste peach blossom wine yet. How about I ask senior apprentice brother to lead the way and bring some peach blossom wine out to drink together? Second senior apprentice brother glanced at Chinyu and smiled. Good. Little junior apprentice brother, come with me. After saying that, he turned around and walked back the way he came. Chinyu stepped forward and followed behind. Perhaps it was because everyone was lost in their own thoughts. No one spoke for a moment. Only the sound of their footsteps echoed in the empty tunnel. He didn't know why, but there was a dark and gloomy feeling about it. Even the shadows beneath the feet of second senior apprentice brother and Sheen, you seemed a bit more strange. After turning an obvious man-made bend, the aroma of the wine suddenly became rich, filling his nose and mouth. Second senior brother stopped and said with a smile, "Little junior brother, we are here." He pointed a finger. "This is the peach blossom wine. Teacher used the peach blossoms in the garden as the base material, and then used the mysteries of this wine cellar to brew it. It is truly the finest wine in the world." In the depths of the ground in front of him, there was a natural depression that formed a round pond. It was filled with wine that was slightly viscous. Under the faint light, it slightly surged and rippled. The rich wine fragrance that he smelled earlier came from this pond. Chinyu nodded in praise. "It really is good wine." Second brother smiled and said, "In fact, the wine cellar is divided into two parts. What you see now is just a big wine pond outside. The peach blossom wine is excellent, but it is not the best." He pointed to a dimly lit spot at the side of the wine cellar. "There's a crack there. Once you pass through it, you'll reach the small wine pond. It's less than 1/3 the size of this place, but the quality of the wine is more than twice as good. When Master was here, he always drank from the small wine pond." The corners of Chinyu's mouth curled up indiscernibly. "Oh, since there's a better peach blossom wine, of course I have to experience it." Second senior apprentice brother smiled and nodded. "I will lead junior apprentice brother there." Sure enough, in the dimly lit area, there was a common-looking crack. It was just wide enough for one person to pass through. Second senior apprentice brother was clearly familiar with this place. He quickly moved his feet and walked over. Chinyu's steps slowed down a bit. He reached out a hand and touched the stone wall. It was extremely damp, and there was water seeping out. When he looked down, what he saw was a dazzling red. "Junior apprentice brother hasn't arrived yet?" Second senior apprentice brother's voice sounded out in front of him. Chinyu grasped his hand and said, "I'll be right there." The narrow passage wasn't long, and they soon passed through. The first feeling they felt was a cold chill. The temperature in the air dropped even lower, and the glimmer of light became increasingly dim. And just as second senior apprentice brother said, there was indeed a wine pond. It wasn't too large, and the wine was thicker and thicker, as if it were about to solidify into paste. Seeing Chinyu come in, second senior apprentice brother's smile became even brighter. He stretched out a hand and said, "This is the small wine pond. It produces the highest quality peach blossom wine. Today, thanks to junior apprentice brother, I will also be able to taste it." "I must thank senior apprentice brother for telling me." The air suddenly fell silent. The two people smiled as they looked at each other. Neither of them spoke. That strange feeling suddenly became even stronger. Second senior brother coughed lightly to break the silence. "Junior brother, aren't you going to get the wine?" Chinyu smiled. He shook his head and said, "Such a precious wine. Just smelling it is enough. I don't like wine by nature. Drinking it is really a reckless waste of God's gift." Second senior brother persuaded again. "Since we're already here, let's just take some." Chinyu continued to shake his head. There was another period of silence. Second senior apprentice brother suddenly turned around. He looked at Chinyu, his voice gloomy. "Why don't you go? Do you want me to invite you personally?" As he stared straight at Chinyu, the smile on his face vanished and blood flowed out from the corners of his eyes. Only then did one discover that his second senior apprentice brother's face was incomparably pale, like a corpse that had been buried deep underground for countless years. Chinyu's lips curved up in a smile, and a cold light appeared in his eyes. He thought that he couldn't continue pretending. It seemed his patience was worse than he had imagined. "Thank you for your kindness, second senior brother, but I can't afford to drink the wine here." Second senior apprentice brother's voice was even colder. "It looks like junior brother really wants me to personally invite you." At this time, blood flowed out from his mouth, nose, and ears. The pale white skin on his body began to rot, revealing the dark red flesh underneath. But what was strange was that the wine fragrance in the air suddenly rose once more, reaching an inconceivable degree. And most importantly, the fragrance of this wine gave Qin Yu an irresistible temptation. It was like a finger that was constantly teasing his heart, making him want to throw himself into the pool of wine in front of him without a care for anything else. Qin Yu held his breath, but discovered that this didn't improve the situation. It was as if the temptation of the wine directly affected his soul. Whether he could smell it or not, he couldn't avoid it. Second senior apprentice brother's entire body began to fester. He opened his mouth to reveal his gums, looking increasingly fierce and horrifying. Junior brother, please come in and drink. Bang, bang, bang. The thick wine in the small wine pond suddenly boiled over. Countless drops of wine shot into the skies, instantly condensing into tentacles that shot towards Qin Yu. A cold light exploded in Qin Yu's eyes. But at this time, his eyes blurred and his reaction slowed down by several beats. The result was that with a light crackling sound, the wine tentacles wrapped around his hands and feet. The wine tentacles instantly tightened. It was like a monster was hiding beneath the small wine pond, wildly pulling at him. The ground beneath Qin Yu's feet cracked apart. His feet dug into the ground like a plow, tearing open a long trench. But he couldn't stop himself from being pulled towards the wine pond. During this process, he revealed a struggling expression, but his eyes remained blurred and he simply couldn't put up any effective resistance. Second senior apprentice brother's festering became even more severe. His entire body had nearly turned into a pool of viscous flesh and blood. His eyes were completely exposed as he stared straight at Qin Yu. The blood vessels on his face bulged out, weaving together in a strange and horrifying manner. A deep and low laugh came from his gums. Come, little junior apprentice brother, this wine is delicious. I'm sure you'll like it. Qin Yu was slowly pulled to the side of the small wine pond. With a dull thud, he fell into it. Second senior apprentice brother's laughter was sharp and filled with eagerness and eagerness. I can eat again. Hungry. I'm really hungry. He turned and walked into the small wine pond. The flesh and blood that constantly dripped down mixed into the wine pond, causing the fragrance of the wine to become even richer. He fell backwards without a single splash of wine. The second senior apprentice brother was like mud as he directly melted into the wine pond. Although the wine pond didn't seem large from the outside, the truth was that it was only on the surface. It actually possessed an astonishing depth. Qin Yu was rapidly dragged down by the tentacles. Even after several breaths of time had passed, he still hadn't reached the bottom. An invisible strength wrapped around him, rapidly forming an icy cold and sticky film on the surface of his body. It was thick and solid to the touch, wrapping around him layer by layer. His field of vision immediately blurred and it continued to strengthen. If this continued, then it would eventually form a seal that would plunge him into complete darkness. Qin Yu sighed, and the blurriness in his eyes instantly vanished. If he couldn't find the real second senior apprentice brother, then he could only take action. Fortunately, Qin Yu's dilemma didn't continue for too long. With a dull thud, he touched the bottom of the pond. Although his field of vision was blurry, he could still vaguely make out something. Not too far away, he found someone that looked exactly like him, motionless and wrapped in a thick film. Although his vision was blurry, he could still vaguely make out some things. Not far away, he found a person who was now exactly the same as him, motionless and wrapped in a thick layer of sticky film. Although he couldn't make out his true appearance, he could roughly make out his figure. Without a doubt, it was his second senior apprentice brother. Qin Yu let out a sigh of relief. Then, his lips curved up in a cruel smile. Although he didn't know, he knew who the person in the wine pool who was pretending to be the second senior brother and knew how to use the body ulceration technique was, but he had obviously not heard of the saying that one should not eat just anyone, or else one would get stomachache. A sharp light exploded in Qin Yu's eyes. Light surged in his palm, and a sword phantom appeared. How should he put it? The feeling at this moment was probably like being peacefully eaten into someone's stomach without struggling or resisting. Then, when that person turned around and pulled out a shining sword from his chest, this feeling was simply exhilarating. But the wine pond didn't feel exhilarating at all. Think about it. If someone took out a sword from your stomach, even if they didn't swing it or slash at you, that in itself was the greatest harm. In particular, if this sword was extremely fierce and had an astonishing killing power, then the harm would be even greater. The only direct result of this was that with a bang, the wine pond exploded once more. Chinyu, who had been swallowed up, immediately felt a strong sense of rejection and was forcefully pushed out. Of course, the moment he was pushed out, Chinyu didn't forget to reach out and grab onto his second senior apprentice brother, who was also at the bottom of the pond. With a light smack, he landed on the edge of the wine pond. He lifted his hand and tore off the film that was now torn to pieces. This thing was in a miserable state. But it wasn't because of Chinyu, but because of the sword phantom. From the feeling of the fragments, Chinyu knew that it wouldn't be easy to tear this thing apart with brute force. The sword phantom had already vanished. Although it didn't say anything, Chinyu rationally gave up on the idea of borrowing its strength. Although this sword had already recognized him as its master. Cough, cough, or rather, it had barely recognized him as its master. It was clear that Chinyu hadn't truly subdued it yet. In other words, Chinyu wasn't confident that if he continued to provoke it, he wouldn't turn around and be split in half by this sword. Whatever, safety first. He would ask second senior apprentice brother to stay in this film for a while longer. In any case, he had already been here for a long time, so a little more time wouldn't matter. The wine pond was still boiling. Within the rich fragrance of wine, there was suddenly a faint smell of blood. Then, the figure that used the great festering art condensed once more. There were no eyelids, but his eyes were still protruding outwards. He glared at Chinyu, his eyes filled with hatred so deep that they nearly condensed into essence. Ah! A sharp scream came from his gums. It was like a high-speed, spinning arrow that pierced into his soul. Chinyu's face paled. Second senior apprentice brother, who was wrapped in layers of film, couldn't help but twitch and twist in pain. Whoosh! The tentacle howled out. But this time it clearly didn't want to entangle Chinyu and drag him into the wine pond. It aimed directly at Chinyu's neck, as if it wanted to give him a clean death in order to dispel the hatred in its heart. But the truth was that the self-eroding art had reached large success, and it had been deceived once more. The moment it screamed, Chinyu had hidden his own soul. He didn't separate from his mortal body, but he was in another strange space that wasn't the same as this place, so he wasn't injured at all. Thus, the paleness of his face was only a disguise. His goal was to fish. But now, the fish had taken the bait. So, facing the whistling tentacle that wanted to behead him, Chinyu sneered and lifted his hand. With a loud clap, he grasped the tentacle. He stepped forwards. The ground cracked and sank into his ankles. At this moment, Chinyu gave off the feeling that he had become one with the earth. Come out! With a loud shout, he fiercely pulled back. The tentacle immediately stretched taut like a bowstring. The result of the struggle was that the tentacle rapidly stretched to the sides, making one worry that it would break at any moment. But Chinyu wasn't worried, because he had already seen through the nature of this tentacle. It was formed from the wine in the pond and was one with it to begin with, unless the other party was willing to cut off its own limbs. If so, then things would be even simpler. After suffering 2 heavy wounds, even if it could escape back to the wine cellar, Chinyu had plenty of ways to kill it. Indeed, not everyone had the courage to cut off their own wrists. Perhaps the one in the wine pond was well aware of the situation it was facing and was prepared to go all out against Chinyu. So, when the tentacles tightened to the limit, the entire wine pool erupted. It was like a river had burst through a dam, rushing towards Chinyu like a raging flood. The great festering art had reached large success. At this time, it opened its gums and ruthlessly bit down at Chinyu. Chapter 1429. As a veteran fisherman, he he certainly wouldn't be bitten by the fish at the other end of the rod. Otherwise, it would be too shameful. Qin Yu stood still, maintaining his previous posture of being one with the earth. Suddenly, he lifted his hand and punched out. When this punch landed, it felt as if the entire earth was suddenly lifted up and then swept out with a crushing momentum. With a dull thud, the roaring flood seemed to hit an extremely high and wide, invisible wall in the nothingness. The teeth of the owner of the great art of self-destruction were immediately smashed to pieces. He was like a housefly that was mercilessly sent flying away. As the fragments of his teeth flew out, his body was also rupturing. He was originally like a walking puddle of flesh and blood, but now he was completely smashed and melted back into the wine. This wasn't his original intention, so the taste wasn't much better. A pained and angry roar sounded from the depths of the wine pool. In addition, Qin Yu even felt a trace of grievance. This caused a ruminative look to appear in his eyes. He thought that even with this person's methods, he still felt aggrieved. It could be seen that his experiences over the years weren't very pleasant. What did the yard master do to him? At this moment, countless thoughts flashed through Qin Yu's mind, involving all kinds of gratitude and grudges, and even sad and tortuous love stories. But soon, he felt that thinking like this was really disrespectful to the yardmaster. Even if the relationship between them was more of a business transaction, it was still a bit too much. Another roar erupted from the wine pool. Qin Yu's eyes flashed, and there was a faint sense of amazement in them. The person in the pool was very powerful. In such a short period of time, he had actually found a way to deal with him. This roar was the same as the previous scream. It was a powerful divine sense attack. But what was different from the first one was that it seemed to have locked onto Qin Yu's soul that had escaped into another space. Although he had only lightly touched the space created by the art of concealing divinity and was still far from being unraveled, this was already extremely difficult. If he had enough time, Qin Yu believed that the art of concealing divinity would be broken. But unfortunately, he didn't have a son. So since he wasn't his father, it was impossible for him to be a living target and help him learn the method to deal with him. Without waiting for the person in the wine pool to attack again, Qin Yu lifted his hand and grasped forwards. With a loud explosion, a large amount of wine directly exploded and miserable screams rang out once more. However, this punch was different from the previous one. It wasn't an attack from the outside, but an internal self-destruction. It was precisely because of this that it was all the more terrifying. For the first time, the scream of the person in the pool revealed an expression of fear. This was because it couldn't figure out why Qin Yu was able to forcefully deprive it of control over a portion of its soul, causing it to explode and devour itself. And this was also the root cause of the creature in the pool's fear. In its current state, even if its physical body was damaged, it wouldn't be fatal. However, the soul was different. If its soul was destroyed, it would truly die, and it would never have the chance to turn the situation around. Not long ago, it had just seen a glimmer of hope with the help of second senior brother's 100 battles. It had suffered bitterly for so many years, and it finally saw a chance to leave this place and get back everything. How could it be willing to die? No, absolutely not. Rumble. The wine in the pool began to tumble. With a loud explosion, it exploded once more. But this time, its target wasn't Qin Yu, but the crack that led to the outside world. In a situation where he wasn't fully prepared, if he forcefully escaped from the wine pool, even if everything went smoothly, he would inevitably fall into a period of weakness and even lose a great deal of his strength. But he couldn't care about that right now. Compared to death, this price was completely bearable. He wanted to escape, and he had already taken action. But that didn't mean that Qin Yu was willing to let him leave alive. For a strange existence of unknown origin that likely had a grudge against the peach garden, it was certainly better for him to die. Qin Yu didn't want to leave behind an irreparable disaster for the peach garden in the future because of a moment of so-called benevolence. Of course, the person in the wine pool that had self-destructed had a horrifying and ugly appearance. So Qin Yu didn't like him at all. He didn't have the slightest thought of showing mercy. Bang! there was a dull explosion once more. The rapidly escaping wine burst apart from within. With a pitiful scream, it forcefully broke apart from the middle. That bloody and horrifying face appeared in the tumbling wine, its face twisted in pain. With a loud whoosh, all of the wine fell back into the wine pool. His body had been cut off. His body, unless he had to abandon half of himself. He could only return here and fuse them back together, abandoning half of himself. It wasn't that the person in the wine pool didn't have such a ruthless and decisive method, but that he hadn't been prepared yet and had to leave the wine pool. This in itself was a tremendous injury. If he were to abandon half of himself, then even if he could escape today, he feared he wouldn't be able to live for long. "Who are you? Who are you?" The roar of a trapped beast erupted from the depths of the wine pool. Billowing waves of sound shook the ground, echoing outwards, forming a rumbling tide. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure out just how Chinyu was able to directly control his soul and cause such serious damage to himself. The truth of the answer was a combined operation, the combined use of Reach the Moon and Defensive Strike. The general summary was to use Reach the Moon to control a portion of the other party's soul. And the reason it could do this was because when this inherited supernatural ability cultivated the soul, there was a shortcut, or perhaps it could be called an unorthodox secret technique. It could forcefully plunder a portion of the target's soul and directly transform and absorb it to enhance itself. Of course, this sort of shortcut came with great hidden dangers. If it was used once or twice, it would be fine. At most, it would take some time to slowly digest it. But if it was used too many times, the impurities in the soul would be swallowed up and the mind would be thrown into chaos, causing serious consequences. Chinyu didn't want to take this shortcut. So, after he controlled a portion of the soul, he switched to defensive strike mode and forcefully controlled it to self-destruct, creating a powerful killing force. What was similar was that when Chinyu punched out before, it was also a part of the combined operation. It was just that Reach the Moon had been replaced with Pick the Stars. This body transformation inherited supernatural ability could allow one to reach the level of becoming one with the earth, borrowing its power to temper one's mortal body. After reaching this step and switching to defensive strike mode, one would be able to strike out with a strike similar to the earth-crushing strike from before, exploding with power, although it hadn't been long since he obtained it, and he hadn't had the time to deeply cultivate it. Chinyu could already confirm that the true method of detonating the power of the 5 inherited supernatural abilities was to fuse them together. But then again, there was no supernatural ability in this world that didn't have limitations. No matter how powerful or ridiculous it was, there would always be flaws. It could even be said that the more powerful a supernatural ability was, the greater its flaws would be. Chinyu didn't know what the flaws of these 5 inherited supernatural abilities were, but the reason he was able to easily roll over this person in the pool was because this person's current state just happened to be tailor-made for him. Thus, he could easily suppress it with a wave of his hand. This didn't mean that this move could be easily replicated and used against anyone. Otherwise, wouldn't Chinyu be in an invincible state? This wasn't some fantasy, nor was it possible for it to exist. Facing this trapped beast in the pool, Chinyu's eyes were ice cold. He wasn't in the mood to explain anything to it. Although everyone was curious, this person in front of him was definitely in existence with a great secret. But even if there were benefits, the Garden Master hadn't been able to obtain them after all these years. Chinyu didn't believe that he could make it reveal anything in a short period of time. Since that was the case, he might as well just kill it to avoid any complications from arising if he delayed any longer. Thus, facing the roaring beast in the pool, Chinyu reached out and fiercely clenched his fist once more. Pung! A deep explosive sound erupted from the pool once more. Ah! A pained roar mixed with despair and brutality appeared on the surface of the wine pool. The rotting face glared at Chinyu. "I can surrender. I am willing to continue being suppressed in this wine cellar and produce peach blossom wine for the peach garden." Chinyu shook his head. "I'm sorry. I was telling you the truth before. I really don't like drinking wine. So this proposal isn't tempting to me at all. The face immediately twisted and filled with crazed roars. Don't force me. Don't force me. There is no enmity between us. Rather, it was the peach garden that captured me and suppressed me, locking me in this wine cellar where I never see the light of day. They use my mortal body to brew wine for you to drink and improve your cultivation and talent. Do you think I don't have the qualifications to swallow a disciple of the peach garden? Moreover, he isn't dead yet. As long as you let me go, I will immediately release him and guarantee that from now on, I will never harm anyone in the peach garden. The Lady Garden Master had indeed gone too far with him. Although it was just a simple statement, it was enough to make one break out in a cold sweat. This person seemed to be in a very miserable state. Chin seriously thought about it. He sighed and shook his head. The more you say, the less I trust you. And as you said just now, how can such a deep hatred be easily let go? It is impossible for me to spend all my time in the peach garden in the future, so it is best to clean up any hidden dangers ahead of time. So you can leave in peace. Ah, rumble, rumble. The wine pool wildly tumbled about. A vortex instantly formed, and the entire underground space shook. Space itself was shaking. Kacha, kacha. Cracking sounds could be heard as cracks appeared in the wine pool. Violent, murderous, and destructive wills were crazily released. The rich fragrance of wine, accompanied by the smell of blood, soared into the sky. All of the wine was rapidly swallowed up by the vortex, and a distorted figure condensed. The flesh and blood on the surface were rotten and scarlet. It was clear that this was the miserable figure that had been suppressed here by the garden master and used to make wine. Now this figure released an extremely terrifying aura. It was like an evil spirit from hell that wanted to destroy everything and cause death to cover the earth. It had flipped out. Chin Yu grabbed his second senior apprentice brother and rapidly retreated. His ruthless roar was like a thunderclap. You want to leave? You will accompany me to the grave. What responded was the back of Chin Yu's head. He grabbed his second senior apprentice brother and rushed into the crack. He didn't even look back, nor did he pause. The figure in the wine pool lifted a hand and grasped forward. The void instantly turned cold and gloomy. A terrifying aura was about to descend, covering Chin Yu and his second senior apprentice brother. But at this moment, with a light hum, the phantom of a stone pagoda suddenly appeared, covering the wine pool and the figure within, isolating Chin Yu and his second senior apprentice brother. Bang! With a dull thud, the phantom of the stone pagoda gently shook. It sneered, "Boy, your strength isn't small. But things like resentful spirits aren't much of a threat to me." Shwa. Chin Yu stepped into the crack and placed his second senior apprentice brother to the side. He turned and said, "Be careful. Don't collapse the wine cellar." The stone pagoda smiled. "Master, rest assured. Since I made a move, I naturally have confidence in myself." As it spoke, its heart was 30% hot, 30% eager, and the rest was restless. But as it thought about it, it suppressed all of its hesitation. Since it had already decided to trust Chin Yu, it couldn't hide anything from him. After all, sooner or later, it would have to face this secret. Chin Yu could sense the complex mood fluctuations coming from the stone pagoda. As if thinking of something, his eyes flashed, but he didn't say anything. He nodded and said, "I'll leave it to you." Within the phantom of the stone pagoda, the one trapped in the pool had gone completely insane. He desperately wanted to drag Chin Yu and Chin Yu down with him, but he was forcefully stopped. His heart was filled with hatred. As he howled, he attacked in a frenzy. His attacks were like a torrential storm as they rained down on the illusory stone tower, causing ripples to spread in all directions. But just as the stone pagoda had said, things like resentful spirits weren't anything to it. At the very least, it didn't show any signs of being damaged. I figured out what you're up to. Moreover, your anger has reached the limit. A resentful spirit in this state often tastes the best. With a low chuckle, the stone pagoda attacked. Chin Yu could see tentacles shoot out from the stone pagoda. They were as fast as arrows, sinking into the resentful spirit's body. His entire body instantly curled up. His eyes that were filled with anger, cruelty, and killing intent were instantly filled with pain. What followed was a loud gulp. Gulp, 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 gulp. This move was indeed sharp and direct. Yu suddenly felt a cold breeze blow past the back of his head, and all the hairs on his back stood up. He thought back to the time when he had been woken up by the stone pagoda. Could it have been like this? Hiss, just thinking about it made his hair stand on end. The pained, resentful spirit crazily struggled, erupting with an unprecedented strength. A wild wave of divine sense swept out like a tsunami, repeatedly shaking the stone pagoda phantom. But although the stone pagoda phantom trembled, it didn't show any signs of breaking through. The gulping sounds didn't stop at all. As time passed, the resentful spirit's resistance became increasingly weak. He curled up into a ball, becoming nothing more than a fish on the chopping block. The stone pagoda phantom rapidly became more solid. In a short period of time, Yu felt that it had become much more powerful. This swallowing art was quite elegant. How come the stone pagoda didn't show it before? Could it only absorb resentful spirits? That couldn't be right. Yu's personal experience was the evidence. How could a living person become food for the stone pagoda? Suddenly, a dignified expression crossed Yu's face. He looked at the stone pagoda phantom in front of him and suddenly thought that it was nearly omniscient and omnipotent. Although the stone pagoda had always used the excuse that it had done some research during its dark and sunless years as an excuse, today Yu suddenly felt that he might have discovered a more reasonable explanation. For instance, as long as one ate enough, they would naturally understand everything. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.